Welcome back, fellow scrubs. This is Mark D. Wiz, and we're here on another Monday for Pocket Fighter EX. We got a special one today. But Pocket Fighter EX is a community-based game. It is not for sale. It's by fans, for fans, not affiliated. Not affiliated with Capcom or SNK. So, with that out of the way, we're going to talk about Rollback today. So I've gotten several requests to cover this as a thing. So that's going to be our main topic of discussion today, and doubling as a live Q&A. So if you have questions while viewing, be sure to throw them in the chat, and then we can address them. So to start off, we're gonna define what Rollback is. We're gonna watch a short little video, and then we're gonna discuss the concepts of it. And then I pulled the questions from Twitter and questions from Discord, and I've got them laid out to go over throughout the discussion. And then we'll incorporate anything that's coming in through chat at the same time, and hopefully it'll all flow well and nice. And then we'll have this, the VOD will be uploaded automatically on YouTube. But if you're on Twitch, you can head over to the YouTube later. I'm going to try to edit it down and cut it up too, so for convenience, and then upload that on YouTube later. So that's the plan. Hopefully everything stays on the rails. So let's get into it. What is Rollback Netcode? Rollback Netcode is a, contrary to popular belief, it is not very new. It is Rollback Netcode was developed about 10 years ago, and it basically mitigates the lag in a fighting game. And instead of having laggy inputs, it tries to correct the timeline of the game. It does a little bit of time travel, does a little bit of crazy stuff, and that way your inputs don't have to be lagged like in the traditional delay-based games. So we're going to watch a short little video by Core Gaming to give the foundation for the rest of this discussion. And I think he summed it up quite nicely. So let me pull that up. And that is right here. Hooray! There we go. Okay, I gotta cut the music. Pause that music. And we are gonna watch. Pay attention, everybody. Just like when we got a video in class, we're going to pay attention, we're going to watch the video, and we're going to take all of the information. Are you ready? Let's go.
In fighting games, performing the Daigo parry or certain combos requires precise timing. Press an input a moment too early or too late, and you fail your combo and maybe die because of it. It's not too unlike learning a song on a musical instrument. Now imagine how hard it would be to play a song you practiced if your guitar did this. What the hell? Not only that, but sometimes the note comes out really late or sometimes a little late. It's random. This is what it's like to play fighting games online with delay-based netcode. When you press a button, there's a delay because the game waits for the other side to receive your input before showing the move on both screens. But this is terrible to play in unless the delay between both players is very short. But not everyone has super good internet connections, and not everyone lives in the same region. If everyone could play offline together, lag wouldn't be a problem, but we live in a world where arcades die and viruses live, so netplay matters a lot. Sadly, there's no way to remove the delay between two distant online connections, but Tony Cannon discovered a way to make it so your move appears immediately, even before it reaches your opponent.
I started working on this around in late 2005, early 2006, and it was because all the games that were coming out for the consoles just had really bad delay-based netcode.
What's insane about this technology is that it's achieved by predicting the future and time traveling. Seriously.
2015? You mean we're in the future?
Of course an ad pops up. Yeah, get out of here. Oh no, there's another one? Hey, I'm from Kentucky. How about that? Regional. Alright, back to the show.
Let's say there's 45 milliseconds of delay between you and your opponent. If the character you control has no lag and your move comes out before the input reaches your opponent, what does your opponent see? If you kick and your opponent's side sees it 45 milliseconds later, both sides are now 45 milliseconds out of sync, which is no good. But there is a way to get it in sync. When your opponent's side receives your input, it can just skip the first 45 milliseconds of your kick animation. You might be thinking this could look weird or choppy, but at full speed, it's hard to tell. It's like when everyone starts singing Happy Birthday, but you join in a little late. You skip the first words of the song so you'll be in sync, and no one will notice. But if your opponent receives all your actions 45 milliseconds late, what do you look like to them in the meantime? In our kick example, you were shown to be just standing there for 45 milliseconds before kicking. Why did their side think you were just standing there? Because it was its best guess. It was a wrong guess, but it was reasonable considering you were standing there previously. At any given moment, each side is trying to predict what the opponent is currently doing based on the previously received input. And what's crazy is, most of the time it's correct. This is because it doesn't take a fortune teller to predict things one frame into the future.
I'm just going to assume the thing you did last is the thing you do next, like forever. Oh, you were holding back to block? I'm going to assume you're still holding back to block.
Can you guess what my sleeping cats will do in the next frame? If you guess sleep, then you might just be a precog. Obviously, you knew the answer because you saw what they were doing previously. But just like a precog, predictions can be wrong. To clearly show what happens with incorrect predictions, let's just say there's a huge 500 millisecond delay with your opponent. If your opponent is walking forward, your side will correctly predict their position because there's only one direction to predict, forward. But if they suddenly do something different like jump, your side will still think they're walking because it didn't get the memo yet. But the moment your side receives the news that your opponent jumped 500 milliseconds ago, it will instantly roll them back to your opponent's correct position, which is in midair at this point. Hence, rollback netcode. Remember, this was an extreme case. With normal amounts of delay, the amount of rollback would be practically unnoticeable. Rollback netcode works because when the predictions are correct, things are in sync, and when it's not, it gets corrected before anyone notices. Sometimes huge lag spikes can go unnoticed if all the predictions are correct in that time, and you might be surprised just how often the predictions are correct.
How fast do people move the controller? How many inputs are there? There's probably no more than like 5 per second. That's a lot, 5 inputs per second. So that means if there's 60 frames per second, that means you're right more than 90% of the time.
But sometimes you can notice if the game has moments of drastic and instantaneous changes, for example, KOs in Third Strike. The KO pops up and the screen freezes right on the final blow, so if the game predicts someone got knocked out but they actually blocked the hit, you can get a you win just kidding moment. This isn't a big problem in Super Turbo because the final blow just slows down the screen.
Yeah, don't do large disruptive VFX or screen text in the first 2 or 3 frames, however long you expect your rollback to be. The other is like don't design moves that have very large displacement on the first or second frame.
Developing the game with rollback netcode in mind will minimize these glitchy moments, but weirdness will happen regardless if network delay is too large and the game has to roll back to things that happened too far in the past.
What the f was that?
But another way to minimize how far you need to roll back is by delaying everyone's inputs on purpose. If you're late to a party, but they postponed the time, you will be less late or even early. The more you delay everyone's inputs, the shorter the rollback time. But of course, more delay means your character feels laggier. Rollback netcode is usually combined with delay netcode to strike a balance between glitchiness and lag. But there is one more potential problem called rift. Let's say your opponent's console overheats and it slows down their game during an online match. This means their inputs will get to you really late, causing massive rollback glitches on your side, while your inputs will get to them ahead of schedule, making their side play perfectly. This results in one-sided rollback. The netcode must correct the rift to make sure both players have a fair fight.
It's like I'm on frame 10, you're on frame 14. We should probably both be on frame 12, so the rollbacks are the same distance.
If rollback netcode sounds more complicated to implement than delay-based, it's because it is.
This is all one tick, right? If we're doing our job right, this takes 16.66 milliseconds and no more.
But if done correctly, it will allow more people to have more playable matches online. I've had excellent games in Punch Planet playing from Korea to California because it uses GGPO, the rollback netcode for fighting games invented by Tony Cannon. He's even made it free to use under the MIT license, and the technology is used in many games already, including old-school arcade games played through Fightcade. Rollback technology is used in AAA fighting games as well, and even Melee has rollback now. If you like fighting games and hate lag, please share this video. For more info on this topic, check out this article by Infill and this video by Holdback the Block. This was Gerald from Corey Gaming. Thanks for watching. This video was sponsored by ExpressVPN, which is literally the VPN I was using before they approached me to do this.
Okie
As an
dokie.
American who lives in Asia,
And that is
there's a
the
lot
end
content
of
I
the
want to watch that's not always available in
main
my
content
region.
of the video.
VPN
That's, I believe,
allows me to
just
set my
ads.
location
So,
to
hopefully everybody paid attention, didn't fall asleep, just like in school. That was a good foundation, a good jumping off point for this discussion. Obviously, this is a Q&A, and we are going to get into answering questions about rollback and GGPO, and getting into some of the more technical stuff. So, the first thing I'd like to say is Corey Gaming is amazing, so go and subscribe to that channel if you haven't. They have tons of great videos. Not just about, like, you know, netcode and stuff, but about all sorts of fighting game things. So, a couple starting initial questions are pretty much applicable right off the bat. So I've got one from Discord from Crimson Guitarist. As I'm an indie dev working on a fighting game, how do I put rollback in my game? Well, this is the video for you. We are going to go over that. Now, obviously, the topic could get super detailed into several areas, and it could be hours or even days worth of conversation to cover everything, but hopefully we'll give you enough of a yeah, there you go, there's the link in chat for Corey Gaming. Get on that. So hopefully this will give you an idea of the overview of what's involved, and then you can go and, you know, search and find out how you want to do your own thing, because a lot of this stuff is pretty customized. It's not like a one-size-fits-all answer to everything. So Crimson Guitarist also had another question: is GGPO the only resource for rollback? And so no, it is not. GGPO is a form of rollback netcode, and it's the progenitor, the original rollback netcode. But GGPO itself is not the entirety of rollback. You could say it's an implementation of rollback. So rollback is pizza, but there's a certain recipe for a certain kind of pizza, and that's GGPO. But that doesn't mean that that's every pizza. And you can roll your own rollback system, and the concepts are really what's important here, not so much whether it's GGPO or not GGPO. Although GGPO is good, it's tested, it's out there, plenty of games have it, works good. I'm implementing it in the Pocket Fighter EX, so, you know, if you don't want to do all the behind the scenes work, it gives you at least a great starting point, if not an entire package that you can work with. So, all right. So the main concepts of of rollback and GGPO, but, you know, same thing. I may use the terms interchangeably from here on out, and for the most part, you can really use them interchangeably. But I'll try to be specific as possible. As you saw in the video, rollback netcode is basically managing different timelines in the game. Instead of waiting for your opponent to react to the input that you sent out before reacting yourself, each player is on its own separate timeline. And eventually, word will get back from the other players of, okay, this is what really happened in the timeline, and then it's got to do some time travel and fix everything. And I think that's the best way to really describe this, because that's exactly what it's doing. When there's a conflict, it goes back in time to the moment that the timelines diverged, and then it tries to replay the game in a way that corrects the timeline. But it does it in a split second. It does it without you noticing. And that's where the teleport comes in. You don't see the character walk backwards and then go into the jump. They're just in the middle of the jump now. So it's just a split-second thing. But behind the scenes, it really is rewinding and replaying the game, but it does it lickety-split, does it in a split second so that you don't see that part of it. That's the magic. That's what separates it from delay-based. But the interesting thing is it's really a layer on top of delay-based. As you saw in the video, you can have a mixture of a little bit of delay to help compensate for the teleporting. And then you can sort of mix and match. And if you played King of Fighters 2002 where they've added the rollback, thanks to Code Mystics, you can set the amount of delay that you want. You could put the delay all the way to the maximum and play delay based if you really want to. Or you can set it all the way to rollback or somewhere in between. And that's important to note when you're going into developing this kind of thing, that it's basically delay based, but with an added layer of extra lag mitigation on top of that. So that's the basic idea of what's going on. And so we'll have to get to a few different points here on how this all works. So, Crimson Guitarist asked again, what the heck is determinism, and why is it important to setting up rollback? So determinism basically means provided the same thing, the same conditions, the outcome will be the same. It's a generic concept that just as long as the input's the same, the output will be the same. And so how this applies to rollback specifically is that the only input for rollback netcode is the controller data. So whether I pressed a button or whether I moved the joystick to a different position, that controller state is the only input that rollback needs to operate. Because all the math and the programming of the game should play out consistently, provided that you give it the same input every time. And most games in the fighting game genre already have this. It's called a replay mode. You can save the replay. The replay doesn't save like a video of the game. It doesn't save all the data from the match. It just saves the inputs, and it plays the inputs back through the game. And provided that it's actually deterministic, it should play out exactly the same every single time. Every frame, the characters are on the same frame of animation. They're at the same coordinates in the game. They're doing the same attacks. The hitboxes are all in the right places. Everything has to be perfect in order to do that. Now, it's not simple, but that's what you have to do. And it, contrary to popular belief, computers are sometimes not really good at doing math in a manner that comes out the same every time. But we'll get into that. So just keep that in mind. So the next big thing that you have to do is your game cannot be tied to a strict sequence of the game updates its data, and then it prints all the sprites and the 3D models to the screen or whatever. Sometimes you don't have 3D models, but you get the idea. That's the typical old school way that games used to operate. It would update, it would draw to the screen, draw the sprites and the backgrounds and all that, and then it'll go back to update the game data, the positioning, the attack, the hitboxes, calculate all that. Then it'll go back and paint it to the screen. A lot of developers are used to having that relationship specifically tied together. You do one and then you do the other, you do one and the other, and you have to break that. You have to break that habit. You can't do that with rollback. Well, you could, but it is very much not advised. The old emulated games that have rollback, like Third Strike Online, and I'm not really sure if that's emulated. I'll take that back. The Street Fighter 30th Anniversary, that's an emulated collection. In order to get an emulated game to work with rollback, you just run the game really fast. And that's not usually a problem because by the time these games are 15 years old, the PS5's not going to have a problem running Third Strike at like 10x the speed. Remember what I said before, you're going back in time and you're fast forwarding in the span of one frame. You're playing the game essentially at multiple times the speed that it's supposed to be played at in the background in order to perform these rollbacks. So with the old emulated games, they're so old you could just do it. It's fine, whatever. But if you were to say take a game like KOF 13, which has a Steam release, and you try to play that at 7 or 8 times the speed that it normally would, and keep in mind it has to do the update and it has to paint the screen. Update, paint the screen, update, paint the screen. Painting the screen takes a long time in relative computer computational times. So if you were to do that, I mean, you say, okay, that thing ran on the 360. Okay, how many times more powerful is the PS4 than the 360, or the PS5 than the 360? It may not have the horsepower to actually do that. And so that's where you get into this need to... Painting the screen must be optional to update your game. So you can update the game data 6, 7, 8 times in a row, and then paint the screen. Otherwise, you're wasting all this time and all these resources painting the screen, and it can cause it to be slow enough where it just doesn't work. It just won't work. You got a high-end PC? Maybe the tippy-top best PC could pull it off, but anybody sub that? Nah, you're gonna run into problems. This is where, again, decoupling the screen rendering from the data update of the game is very important. So that's one of the big ones that people get hung up on. And then there's the whole thing of your data update in the game needs to be lean. You need to trim all the fat you can because, again, it's running 6, 7, 8 times or in a row per frame. You're literally running the game at 7, 8x speed per game. So there's some games that just, it wouldn't work on their target platform if they wanted to implement rollback, after the fact. You think of like, think of the design philosophy with Super Smash Brothers, where they're like, we're not gonna put rollback in. We're gonna make sure that the game is just as flashy and graphically intensive and full of so many things, and assist trophies and Pokemon balls and all this other stuff. And so they spend their computational budget, so to speak, on all of that. And there's no room to run that 7 times. They couldn't do it even if they wanted to, because they didn't design for it to be lean. They designed for it to be as packed as possible. So there's a lot of concern with what we call performance budget, where you have only so much time to render between frames. So you've got 1/60th of a second, right? All the computations have to be done in that time before you render. Otherwise, you skip frames, and nobody wants that. You're not going to play a fighting game at 30 frames per second. Like, even Nintendo knows that. they're not gonna skip out on that, right? So let's see. Chat says, is that why they say implementing rollback in an already released game is harder than doing it at the beginning? Yes, and we are absolutely going over that. That is 100% true. And this is basically the reason why. If you don't plan for it up front... Oh, wait, hold on. I forgot to put my music back on. I would say it's awful quiet here. I'm just listening to myself talk. Here you go. Listen to Good Fighter. I think that's Good Fighter. Yeah, that's Good Fighter. I love Street Fighter. Street Fighter 3 Second Impact's music is, for me, that's the stuff. Anyway, losing the plot here. So yeah, and that's kind of a good jumping point to the next bit. So I had Disco Samurai on Twitter ask, I think I asked you already, but it would be cool for others to hear how complex and expensive it is to add rollback to games that are out nowadays. So I took that question to mean exactly what you said in chat. Is this why it's hard to take games that weren't designed for rollback and to make it happen. And yeah, that's kind of it. If you didn't plan out your rollback from the beginning, you could run into that problem. Like Smash Brothers got way too much going on to even bother putting rollback in. The Switch wouldn't be able to handle it. You have to be able to run everything in the game 7 times. Now, I put a little asterisk with that because there are some techniques that you can use to help split up the computations and stuff, and maybe we'll get into that later on in the video, but that's the real advanced stuff. But yeah, so there's that kind of efficiency barrier there, and on the target platform, could the target platform even handle doing that? Even if you had the rendering decoupled, it still doesn't matter. If you've used up all your CPU budget, you've got to trim that down by 7 times. Can you do that? Some games might be able to, and some games no, definitely can't. So that becomes an issue, going forward too. So let's see. And then Crimson Guitarist again asks, why is rollback so difficult to implement in fighting games? So I'll take this one to mean just any fighting game in general. And the answer is it kind of is and it kind of isn't at the same time. It really depends on the circumstance of what you're doing. If you plan for it right away, you can have a relatively smooth time with it and go on and be successful with it without too many hiccups. But if you didn't plan for it, that's where it gets really hairy. That's where you spend time recoding the entire engine, re-speccing out what you need to do, changing some of the levels of detail or the features in it to cut your performance budget so that you can make it all fit. So, and it kind of basically what we just went over. So let's see. Disco Samurai on Twitter again asks, also, why do so many of these companies not invest in rollback from the get-go when the community obviously wants it? There's really 2 main issues with that. This is going to be on the test. You're damn right it is. You better pay attention. I ain't repeating myself. So there's 2 issues with this in general. Obviously, it's possible. And when you do make a new game, that is the best time to do it. Because adding it to an existing engine can be a huge, lengthy process, can cost ungodly amounts of money and time and all that to get that to work. And NetherRealm did that. And they were a little bit in the video that we just watched. And they did a whole GDC talk, which I highly recommend to watch that. But it's like an hour long, so we're not going to watch it here. But if you want to check that out after, that's a good one. And they go into a lot of technical details. And it took them, I believe, 8 people, a dedicated team of 8 people, for 10 months to reprogram the game for rollback. It's not cheap. Like, look, NetherRealm's got the money, right? They can spend it. But a lot of these companies will look at that and be like, yeah, that's like reprogramming the entire game. We might as well just develop the game all over again, because that's really what it is. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to spend that money. Like, we don't have the budget for that, or that's dumb. We don't see the value in it. We're not going to do it. So the best time to do it is when you start a new game, when you start a new engine. But here come the 2 big problems. One, the internet speeds and latency in Japan are sublime. They are exceptional. They don't have a lot of lag. They don't have a lot of problems with connections. So when they test it, they're like, nah, it's fine. It works for us. I don't see the problem. It's fine. It works great. But they're not, because they don't live in other regions of the world. They're not really privy to having the first-hand experience of having really bad internet. So they don't think about it like that. They're like, oh, well, you know, it can't be that bad. I mean, how far behind is it really from what we have? And the answer is quite substantial far behind. You know. Oh yeah, good. Thank you, Larry, for the NetherRealms GDC talk. That the link's in chat there too. And in the VOD, I'm gonna put these in the description as well, so you'll be able to get those. But so that's the first problem, is they don't experience the problem firsthand, and that's somewhat of a human nature thing. If you don't experience the problem firsthand, you may not fully understand the full gravity of the issue. And they're like, yeah, okay, it's fine. We can play across the entire island of Japan. It's fine. It works great, whatever. But are they really testing from, like, Japan to the US? Do they care? And the answer is often, unfortunately, they don't. It works fine in Japan. That's good enough for them, and they move on. Because here's the second problem. This rolls right into the second part. Even when you're making a new game, you typically still reuse parts, at least parts of an engine that were used before. You may gut a lot of the stuff out, but for the most part, you're not going to restart the entire programming base from scratch. You're going to pick out the parts that worked, or just import the engine and edit it until it's got all the new features that you want to add to it. It's building on top of what you already had. And that kind of does a couple of things. One, it's easier to get it up and running and going, and you don't have to start from scratch. But the bigger reason, at least from the corporate side of it, is it costs a lot less to get a running start as opposed to starting from scratch. Say, oh, we got to redesign the entire way that this engine works, right? Oh, okay. Well, what's that cost gonna be? You know, we got to start from scratch. We're not going to be able to reuse what we had before. We've got to rethink how to design this piece of software. You know, the architecture is different. Yeah. And, you know, the budget officer will look at that and they'll be like, yeah, just reuse the old one. We're not going to spend for that. So it's kind of a double whammy there. And I think that's why a lot of companies don't do it. Now, I'll give Capcom credit, and they've been trying to innovate on this for a long time. And it hasn't always worked out, and that's fine, but they made baby steps way before anyone else on the Japanese side of things did. Now, you've got, in the West, you've got Killer Instinct, who really shoved it out there. And then eventually Mortal Kombat had it, and so on and so forth. So the Western developers have been kind of on it already. Oh, yeah, and Third Strike Online Edition, that was on the 360 and the PS3, that had GGPO in it. And, well, that was ported by a Western developer. So, yeah, that's kind of the thing there. It's two different mentalities, right? So let's see. Chat says, kind of wish they'd just play games in other regions, but that's a cost itself to fly people out there. Well, you don't really even have to do that. I mean, you could just send the build to your, I don't know, Europe office or West Coast United States office, whatever, and then try to play the game. Like, they could do that, but not all companies have extensions in other countries too. Some companies just don't. They're in Japan, they're seated in Japan, and they don't have offices in other places. They could certainly contract, you know, another studio to help them out with that, but that's cost, that's time, that's money. And why do we do that? It works fine in Japan. We don't need to spend that money. And then, you know, it's audio was getting weird. But it's recovered. Okay, all right, that's good. All right, let's see. Let me catch up a little on chat here. The Darkstalkers port also had GGPO. Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. Is that the Chronicles or whatever, the PS3 one? Are 3D fighters like Tekken inherently harder to implement rollback compared to 2D games like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat? Yes. What has more to do with the 3D graphics, I think, than anything. So, sure, there is a difference between 2D and 3D hitboxes. That's absolutely a thing. but I think most of the complexity comes from like, how much budget are you spending on rendering? And I think this is where Tekken kind of went into that zone where we talked about that even if they go back and they start to recode some stuff, the PS4 just doesn't have the horsepower to add it after the fact. There's just too much stuff already going on. They never thought about it to begin with. So when they go back, they're like, okay, we need to slim down our update, make it more efficient so we can run these rollbacks, so we can run these resimulations, saving loading states, and all that stuff. And they ended up only being able to do 3 frames of rollback. And the rest of it has to be compensated with delay, which is not ideal. It's a little better, but a lot of regions are not going to get nearly the same benefit as a full rollback game. But I guarantee that the problem was there was just too much going on in the game. And it could be there's too many NPCs in the background. There's too many destructible terrain pieces to keep tabs on, or the rendering is so takes up so much time that there's just not enough time left to do all the data updates. It could be any number of things, any combination of that. But I guarantee that that's the problem that they ran into. And I don't think that it's necessarily that much more complicated, although the 3D animations can get pretty hairy when you want to do deterministic updates for that kind of thing. But it would have theoretically been doable if they had planned for it from the beginning. Because when you plan for it from the beginning, you're like, okay, we know we can't spend half the time rendering. We just don't have the budget for that. The CPU budget, the computational budget. Just not enough power in the console to do that. So we've got to scale that down a bit. We've got to find smarter ways to cut down on rendering and things like that. Like, you plan that out ahead of time, then you have more leeway in kind of getting everything into the performance that you need. So that's why they only have 3 rollback frames. I never understood why. That's my guess. I mean, obviously I don't work at Bandai Namco, but I guarantee that that was the case. I can't imagine what else would be the problem there, and for Japan, the attitude is, hey, it works great here. Wow, this is really great. We only need 3 frames of rollback. Wow, awesome. It's like, yeah, that's great, but in the United States, you need 7 to cover the widest range. If you don't have 7 frames of rollback, you're going to run into problems. And the NetherRealm video goes into the specifics of why they chose 7, and it has to do with how many frames of latency they can get away with before the match becomes unplayable, essentially. And that's what I'm targeting to. I'm trying to get 7 frames. So chat says, so I would assume that the game is already ready for rollback. They just need to optimize the game for more rollback frames. At this point, kind of, yeah. I mean, if they've gone back and they've done the work, and we don't know, maybe they didn't do, maybe there were certain things that they skipped on, or certain things that they kind of just winged it, and they're like, okay, we'll experiment with it in 7, but maybe we'll build it from the ground up for Tekken 8 for the next game that comes out, and they could have used it like that. Now Capcom's done similar things. The Omega mode, not Netcode related, but the Omega mode in Street Fighter 4 was a playground for the developers to start developing the concepts for Street Fighter 5 and so on. That's what I expect to happen. I expect that they've gone through it, they've gone through the growing pains, now they know what they're in for, and so they can plan better for next time. And assuming that they still don't hold the opinion that, well, 3 frames is good enough for Japan, so it's good enough for everybody. If they think that, then, well, maybe we won't get, a better planned game for Tekken 8. But I think they know now. I think they really know. Because you see, ArcSys, of course, is doing this with Strive. Strive plays wonderfully online. And for pretty much any connection from across the oceans and everything. But they're also affiliated with Bandai Namco a bit, right? Because they do Dragon Ball FighterZ, and while that doesn't have rollback, they have gone on record that they would be thinking about rollback in the next bit of games. And they even said that, you know, putting rollback in fighters is not feasible. But maybe for the next one, we'll think about it. We'll plan and we'll see what we can do about it. And because there's a relationship there between Bandai Namco and ArcSys, I think that, number one, I think that's what started their interest in Tekken to begin with. And at least part of the reason. Speculation, but I think it's a fair assumption. But that's going to leach into the next thing. You're going to say, wow, look, Strive did so good. Why can't we have that? Look at everybody talking, singing the praises about it. People are going out of their way to say how good the netcode is. It's the highlight. Like, it's Strive's main feature now. It's been talked about so much. And that gets some heads turned. And since there's a business relationship there, you know, they talk, they share ideas, and they'll notice that. It's not like they're going to not look at what the other guy's doing, especially when they're doing similar kinds of games. So I think there's good things in store. I have faith that Bandai Namco has seen the light, and I think that hoping, but I'm pretty positive that Tekken 8's gonna have a full rollback. I think that's a very reasonable thing to happen, especially since they've already done it, you know, part of it in 7. So yeah, and it's a good selling point, especially now. And now I know, well, we hope the whole virus thing's going away, but it's still a big thing. It's got everybody to think about it. Like, it wasn't as big a thing for the competitive community. They just meet in person. They wouldn't care. Oh well, the netcode sucks. Whatever. I'm going to my local, and I'm gonna have a good time there. But once that got taken away, everybody started talking about it, and I don't think they're gonna stop talking about it now that things are getting back to normal. Because like CEOs having their offline tournament now, everything's starting to come back around. But I don't think the discussion's going away. I think, number one, it's convenient for people to play online. And people who couldn't go to tournaments before were now suddenly able to play online in tournaments. And games with good netcode, of course. So, I think all that's... I don't think that's going anywhere. I think we're going to see it stick around. And it's going to be something that people are just going to go out there and be like, no rollback, no buy. And that's it. You know, and KOF 15 was in that spot. They had a massive backlash when they did the Japanese Fighting Developers Roundtable. Hold on. Who's crying? Oh, it's Little Pete. What do you want? Come here. Come here. Oh, he's crying. What? Why are you crying? Whoa, you're flying. He's growing up. Hello. Why are you crying? I know, you don't like being in the box. He misses me. Yeah, hello. And we got chickens here. Little baby ones. Time for your regularly scheduled chicken break. Yeah. I don't know if you guys could hear him chirping in the background as he was crying. I'm right here. You can see me. I'm right here. You just want to come out. You just want pets, right? Yeah. You gonna cry if I put you back? No, you're just gonna peck the microphone. Okay. I can hear them, yes. Yeah, I got him up here on the desk now, so you'll get to hear him, but he was crying in the background for a bit there. He was really screaming. Whoa, what's that? You gonna fly? He's perching on my thumb now. He's a little tiny thing. He's definitely smaller than my hand. Yeah, I know, you're all happy now. Those are little happy chirps. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to go back because I gotta finish my whole spiel here. Okay, come in. I had the box right next to me all the time because as soon as you break line of sight with them, they're like, oh god, parents are missing, I'm lost, and then they start screaming. I am not a farmer. I'm not a farmer. Look, the chickens just live around here. All right, it just is what it is. And when something happens, we take care of them. That's all. Anyway, TLDR. I think we're headed into the age where this is no longer an option. People are going to go crazy. SNK got blasted. They went to their developer roundtable, and Rollback came up, and then SNK's turn to speak was up, and they're like, yeah, so we're going to change the subject and not talk about that. And we're going to talk about something else, and Twitter blew up. They got a hashtag trending. They went ham on it, and it was so bad for a few days that the SNK had to come out, and they're like, look, we are trying to put Rollback into King of Fighters 15. We've been developing it. We just hadn't said anything about it yet, and we're planning to have that in the game. So, hey, that's good. I'll take that. So hopefully it'll work out for them, and they'll have it in the latest game. And I've kind of expected that they were thinking about it because KOF 2002 has it, KOF 97 has it, Last Blade 2 has it, Garou Mark of the Wolves had it. You know, they were putting it in the old games to figure it out. It makes sense. So they're definitely thinking about it, you know? They're starting to listen, they're starting to get it kind of held to account in that way. And it's partly on us as a community to communicate that, yeah, look, in America, a lot of people can't play your game, and if I can't play the game online, I'm not going to buy it. And that's what really makes them listen. And that's what happened. And SNK was like, okay, whoa, hold on. All right, we'll talk about it. We're talking. And I really hope that it works out. If KOF 15 has good rollback, that's going to put KOF on the map. It's going to be up there, because not a lot of games have it right now. So, alright, so let's see. What was the next segment here? Let me look at my question sheet. Okay, so implementing GDPO or rollback into engines. So say you want to make a game and you want to put GGPO. So the questions here, these two are kind of related, so I lumped them in. So first one from Gilgamesh KOF GC on Twitter: how to implement rollback to Unreal Engine projects. And so here's what I'm going to say as a blanket statement for implementing, you know, what engine should you use, things like that. It's kind of an engine agnostic kind of thing. Now, if you put in the work, you could probably get rollback to work in just about anything. But different engines will have different levels of determinism, because some of them are built with the inaccurate math that we talked about a little earlier, and some of them are a bit more solid. But you have to identify what isn't deterministic in the engine, and then you'll have to compensate for that, because it has to be deterministic. If it's not deterministic, rollback's not going to work. Eventually you're just going to get a desync and something weird's going to happen, and then in that case the proper thing to do would be to just disconnect the match at that point, because your replays are going to be all goofed and all that. There's a huge topic that you can open up with determinism about how to achieve it and all this stuff. You need to know, first and foremost, that floating point numbers, we're getting into the programming stuff now. Floating point numbers, don't use them. Don't even try. The standards for how they work depend on your operating system, depend on your motherboard, your CPU, all that sort of stuff. Floating point numbers will be different on my computer as they are from yours, potentially. I mean, if we have the same processor and OS and updates and all that, it might be the same, but chances are it's not going to be. What if you make a game that's playable on Linux or Mac, and you want cross-platform play? Don't use floats. I used to love floats. Yeah, floats are convenient. So here's the thing, floats are convenient to use, and they're performant, meaning they're very efficient. So that's why everybody started using them. It's like, okay, there's a little bit of an inconsistency between, you know, the same answers and having different different levels of inaccuracy. But they're usually very small, right? They're very tiny little, okay, it was off by like a 10-digit decimal. Okay, who cares? Like, it's so small that, okay, one computation like that is fine. But when you're running thousands and thousands of calculations every single frame, those errors will eventually add up into a big error. And then you get a desync. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe that hitbox missed by a pixel or a subpixel. And all of a sudden, on one screen, Ryu punched Ken in the face, and on the other screen, Ryu whiffed that attack. Well, now you got a desync. That's not deterministic. That's no good. Can't have that. So that's where it becomes very important. But, okay, so here's the problem. Going back to what engines are good for this kind of stuff, or how do you do this? Unreal Engine uses floats. Unity Engine uses floats. Pretty much every engine uses floats. And unfortunately, that's a no-go. You can't use floats. So you will have to find ways to work around that. So currently, I'm building components for Unity that are deterministic. They use fixed point numbers instead of floating point numbers. And I won't get into the specifics of what that really means, but just know that the fixed point calculations are deterministic. And the floating point calculations are not, especially cross-platform. So that can be a problem, obviously. So what I'm doing in Unity is I'm programming all these components to handle all the fixed point stuff, and then it communicates to Unity what it needs to know in order to render the game and to keep all the objects intact. And so it sort of kind of works like a middleman between managing Unity's features and making sure that the core gameplay is deterministic so that the rollback can work. And, well, actually, I should have had it going in the background here for a little animation, but here's, basically, this is my rollback test that you see here. This is actually rolling back 7 frames every single update. Every single frame is actually 7 frames in one. And you don't see a difference, and that's good, actually. If you saw something weird, it would be strange. I mean, okay, look, let's be honest. You're seeing a lot of weird things on screen, right? With the rotating boxes and the test sprites and all that. But the idea is that, like, when you're looking at Ryu, you're like, oh no, he's not moving weird. It looks pretty all right. It looks normal, and that's good. So it's working here. It's in practice. It is working. So it is doable. You can actually use like Unity and Unreal to do that kind of stuff. And in fact, Street Fighter V is made in Unreal, and I think Strive is. Don't hold me 100% to that, but I think Strive is actually built in the Unreal Engine. But what they have to do is they have to make their own little subsystems for the deterministic parts and make sure that that is not tampered with by anything else. Question from chat. Don't delay-based games have to be deterministic for online and replays to work? Yes. However, it gets a little complicated. For the most part, yeah, you can have a deterministic. You need determinism for delay-based. Otherwise, replays won't work, and all that stuff. Oh, Tekken 7 also uses Unreal. Okay, cool. Yeah. So Unreal is a very good engine. It's very performant, but you would have to change a lot of things to make it deterministic. And here's the thing. This is part of why this gets into crossplay. Crossplay is next level determinism. You need fixed point numbers. You need that super exact calculation. If you don't have crossplay, you can kind of phone it in a little bit. So, and this is why a lot of fighting games be like, oh, you've got PS4 version, you can only play with PS4. Or you've got Xbox, you can only play with Xbox. And here's the thing. Like I said, the fixed point issue, or I'm sorry, the floating point issue with the calculations depends on your processor and your operating system and things like that, all the PS4s are made the same. They all got the same processor. They've all got the same operating system. So even if you use floating point numbers, and this is the dirty secret, if you use floating point numbers on like the 360 or the PS3 or the PS4, you can play with the other consoles as long as they all as long as they all calculate the floating points the same. But if you go from an Xbox to a PS3, now you got a problem because those floating point numbers won't match up. So there are different levels of strictness depending on what you want to do. Capcom had to have done some sort of fixed point numbering because they have the crossplay between the PC and the PlayStation. So there's something going on there. They went above and beyond, but like delay base, say like Guilty Gear Xrd, you can play with PS3 and PS4. And I thought that was strange. I'm like, wow, okay, so do they happen to use fixed point? Maybe, maybe not, but I found out that the PS3 and the PS4 calculate floats the same way. So that was why that one was cross-compatible. But you never saw, like, the PC being able to be played against the PS4. Because they wouldn't, there's no way to guarantee that the calculations would be the same. Because all PCs are pretty much just kind of a random grab bag of different parts in a sense. And you're going to get all sorts of different types of calculations all over the map. So that's, if you have a PC, if you're doing it on a PC, you absolutely need to do the fixed point because every different PC is configured differently. And if you want to have crossplay with any console or with other systems like Macs and Linux and all that, you absolutely need that fixed point. So, and again, this could be an entire video on its own to all the specifics about it, but I think that should give you enough of an idea of how important it is and why it's important and what conditions it is important in. So, alright, let's see the next bit here. Okay, and this kind of follows up with a similar question. So Jotamide at Jotamide on Twitter. Sorry if I said that wrong. What game engine do you recommend for hobbyists to start dipping their toes into using GPO? I've heard GameMaker is fully deterministic, which makes it a good fit. Okay, so I had to look this up. I wasn't sure. I don't use GameMaker for various reasons. I've never played a GameMaker game that I haven't had controller issues with or resolution and video issues with. So I tend to not consider that a viable development platform for quality stuff. That's just my opinion. If you like it, you like it. It is what it is. That's just what I think about it. So I've never really dealt with it, but I figured I'd ask a couple people about it. And apparently GameMaker is actually deterministic. Now, I don't know the specifics of it, but that's actually a great launching off point. I mean, that does a lot of work for you, right? To do that. Now, you've got to deal with all the other issues that I've experienced before, like the controllers and all that stuff. I don't know how fixable those things are. That's something you'll have to weigh. But if you did use that for the gameplay, it being deterministic is a huge step up. You don't have to worry about that stuff. Now, I would still be cautious that any kind of feature that they might implement at some point may not be deterministic. So you'd have to think about that and make sure you're testing for determinism, even though, it's like, okay, it is deterministic, but let's make sure that that's actually the case. But the broader point, so what would you use for, a hobbyist? What engine would you say that a hobbyist would start with? And my answer is unfortunately kind of whatever you want. The process of getting the rollback, you may do a little more work in some engines or another, but you should start small. If you don't have a project that you're trying to adapt, then just make a small little thing. Just make like a 2-player Pac-Man clone, or like Geometry Wars, maybe a 2-player Geometry Wars, something like that. Something very small, very easy to code for, doesn't have a lot of complexity, because complexity is going to be the bane of your existence in Rollback, especially when you have a desync and you got to figure out what's wrong. I would just start with a very small game, something that you can throw together, in a weekend normally, or if you're really new to it, then like a month's project, something like that. Just something very small scale, and add Rollback to that. Then you'll go through all the growing pains, and you'll figure out what to do. And once you have a successful demo of the Rollback working through the network, through NetPlay, then like you're 90% there. Now you know what to do, and now you're in the position so when you do your next game, you know exactly what you need to plan for, you know exactly the pitfalls you can fall into, and it'll be a much smoother experience. So to get a little more technical, what I would recommend specifically is to not try to adapt any one engine into a deterministic this or that or whatever. I would make a game that runs outside of the engine. And so this gets a little complicated, but hopefully it'll make sense. You want to take it's almost like the old games where when they emulate the games and they add the rollback to it, the rollback is working through the emulator, but the game itself is its own self-contained emulated space that's doing its own thing. It doesn't have any awareness of what's going on the outside world. It's just playing. It's just emulating Third Strike, and it's going, and it's playing, and it's fine. And it has no concept of rollback and all this other stuff. It's just being manipulated from the outside. You can make a very small, tiny game and just do that, where the game runs in its own little piece of the code. It updates itself. It's completely separate from Unity's systems and Unreal systems and whatever. And that'll make it much less complicated in order to do your rollbacks and to save your state and all that stuff. Now, for big development, that could become very costly and very complicated, which is why I say you want to do a small project for this. Just a very small little, hey, we're going to clone Pac-Man, we're going to 2-player Snake, I don't know, whatever it is. So, pick something off the old Nokia phones, right? They're pretty simple, and do something like that. And that'll give you the ability to keep it in this confined environment that'll be easier to manage with all your rollback and your determinism and your save states without having to get too ingrained into the editor. So that's as a starting project. That's why I say the engine itself kind of doesn't matter at that point, because you're not really working in the engine. You're just kind of using the engine as a vehicle to get the game running, but the core of the game will run on its own. So hopefully that makes sense. I think the programmers out there will know what I'm talking about. So, in fact, Ubisoft did this with their Doom ports. Was it Ubisoft? No, it's not Ubisoft. Bethesda. I keep screwing that up. Bethesda, with their recent Doom ports, they basically just had the core code of Doom running, and then it would just pass like the render to Unity, and Unity would display it on the screen, and it would take the inputs and send it back to the core. But the Doom wasn't recreated in Unity. It was the core of Doom's programming running in its own little sector outside of Unity's influence. And then they would just communicate back and forth. That's what you got to do to get started. And that's essentially what I've got going on here. I mean, this is a bit more complicated because I want to integrate rollback into Unity. That's a whole other next level thing. But the idea was I didn't just pop up Pocket Fighter EX and start tinkering with it. It was too complex to work with, to break apart and experiment with. So I created a new project. That's why it's just this weird test thing going on here. I just created a new project file and I started building. And so that's kind of that philosophy, but to the next step, to the next level. So hopefully that makes sense. That would be my recommendation. So let's see. Chat was talking about Wi-Fi. Where does Wi-Fi and Ethernet come into all this? Oh no! We got the Wi-Fi warriors out there. Okay, so here's the thing. Yeah, and Reese Nice, you're correct. Wi-Fi is less stable. So what happens is Wi-Fi is built. It's not built for latency. The technology was never built for latency. It was built for convenience. So sometimes the connection will just drop for a period of time and this and that. Now, it's so quick that you yourself won't notice. But packets might get backed up. Maybe it'll stop, for a few milliseconds, it'll stop transmitting. And then all of a sudden, everything that was from the past few milliseconds just comes flying in all at once. And it's very inconsistent. So when you're playing a fighting game, you want consistent connection between the two. And if you have a large period of time where it drops, that's going to cause a big rollback. And if there's a lot of rollbacking during the match, because you're using Wi-Fi, that sucks. Now, rollback helps a lot with that, but it can't cure it completely. And if you were to then swap that Wi-Fi player out for an Ethernet player, chances are that connection is going to improve substantially. There's a lot of misconception about, I've got 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. I've got super Wi-Fi. My Wi-Fi is so fast. None of that matters. Because the technology that Wi-Fi is built on, inherently there's interference. Things get lost, and it has to stop and wait and think, and then resend stuff as necessary. It's just not built for latency. It works fine in transmitting files and stuff because you are not depending every frame on something coming in, you know what I mean? So it's a different kind of expectation. Just because it's fast does not mean that the latency is low. Or, that sounds like an asinine statement, but think about this. There's two different types of transmission benchmarks here. You have the bandwidth, how much can come in at once, and how fast it can travel from point A to point B, and those are not the same things. A high bandwidth, I've got a gigabit connection. Okay, chances are your gigabit connection is also going to be fast, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. It just means that a lot of data can come in at one time, but it doesn't mean that that data got to you in a timely manner. And Wi-Fi is really bad at doing things in a timely manner. So that's the big difference. That's the TLDR on the Wi-Fi. It's just not built for it, and it doesn't matter. I don't think we're ever going to have Wi-Fi that's going to be performant like that. We got to move to a different technology to get a lower latency thing. And you're always going to have interference too. So there's going to be some level of interference with wireless stuff. So it is what it is. Hey, remember when people had the Switch to Joy-Cons, right? And the transmission between the Joy-Con and the Switch dock could get interrupted by any kind of electromagnetic interference or just somebody walking between the console and the controller, or having an object between the two, something like that. The same thing happens to Wi-Fi. It could just be, I don't know, someone turns on the microwave and all of a sudden the Wi-Fi just kind of gets all wonky. You can't stop it from being weird. So it's always recommended to have the Ethernet, because it would take a lot to get an interference on a proper Ethernet cord. So there's a big benefit there. So let's see. 2Hitmat says, I probably missed it, but can you point out what each thing in your demo is testing? Actually, we haven't gone over that, but I can go over that. That's fine. And how does rollback work with things like quick animation canceling? I'm not sure I quite understand that question. Can you elaborate on that? And in the meantime, so hopefully you can see it here better. Oh, that's not gonna work. I don't think I can scroll to see it, to blow it up. So hopefully you can read this, but it's just saying that it's done a maximum of 7 rollback frames and a minimum of 7 rollback frames. I locked that. I told it has to do 7, regardless of the frame rate. And then this is how many milliseconds each one of those rollback frames takes, each one of those simulation frames. So it's averaging about 0.78 milliseconds, which is pretty good. I can't go over 1.5. That was the amount of time that I determined that I wouldn't be able to go past that. And so I'm using 75%. Now, again, this is not running a full game. This is just a test. So, okay, it's running fine here, but, you know, when we actually plug it into Pocket Fighter EX, it might get a little hairy. Here, let me turn off the collision debug there. And so this update on demand, this is where I decoupled my game updates from Unity's rendering. I made my own update system, and it analyzes the scenes and the objects, and then it updates, you know, what it needs to. And here it analyzed 2 scenes. You know, it checked 91 game objects, and then it determined it only had to update 39, and then it had to update 37 scripts. So things like that. And then there's some other averaging stats here for me to check out, like the average total resimulation time. Oh yeah, and loading and saving states, which is important. I guess I really haven't talked about that, but you need to be able to save the data, your gameplay relevant data, and then to be able to load it back in a deterministic manner, by the way. But that's all part of the time rewind system. You're not like really rewinding time, you're just kind of selecting a point in time to go back to, and then it just loads that data for the game, and it goes. In the emulated games, like in Third Strike and the Anniversary Collection, or like any of the ones in the Anniversary Collection, they use save states like any other emulator would. They save state the entire game, and then they load the state. But those games are so old that works, and that's fine. If you're going to save state a modern game, you can't save state everything. It would be unfeasible, it would be way too slow. You have to slim down the program to only pick out the important bits of data, sit and save that, and then be able to apply those important bits of data back in a very timely manner. Now, this is not all that super efficient yet, but Unity is kind of strange, so I don't know how far I can really push this. You know, we're at 1.3 milliseconds for a load state, and then savings an average of 0.5 milliseconds. The savings not too bad, but the loading is kind of an issue. So part of the problem is Unity is just a bit, it does its thing its own way, and I have to capitulate to it when I load the state. There's just some stuff I have to just play ball with it, and it can become an issue. And hopefully I'll be able to lower this over time, and I've actually substantially lowered it. It used to be like 2.5 milliseconds, but now we're also running this in the editor. That makes everything slower too. That's a whole other thing. So these numbers are actually faster when the game's running on its own, you know, outside of the editor, but that's getting into the real weeds of it. So okay, so we have an elaboration. Leo says, for things like FADC, how does the netcode manage to get it right mid-combo if the connection gets wonky? It really is the timeline concept that keeps everything on track. As long as the game's deterministic, you can take the input from the controllers and rewind the game and reinsert the input for the controllers, and it should play back perfectly. So if there is an issue where, GGPO predicted wrong, or whatever your rollback is predicted wrong, we just load state like 6 or 7 frames ago, shove all the inputs in that have come in since then, and then it just replays the simulation. It resimulates back to the current time. It just does the frame updates, and that's where you need 6 or 7 or 8 frames of efficiency to make those rollbacks work, because we go back, 8 frames, we slot in the input again, and then we just fast forward the game back to where it's supposed to be in regular time. And we do this in 1 frame's time. Boom, it's instant. It just happens behind the scenes. And that's where you get the teleporting character. And so it doesn't matter what's going on. The old timeline is erased out of existence. It's just gone. And it resets the timeline, and it corrects it with the proper input as it goes forward. So it almost is completely, doesn't matter what's going on in the game. or what the situation is, because you're just wiping it. You're Thanos snapping that timeline out of existence, and you're going back and you're doing it over. And that corrects the timeline, and then everybody moves on until the game diverges again, and it'll keep doing that. And like we saw in the video in the beginning of this segment, a lot of these happen and you don't even know they're happening because they're so quick that, you know, you can't really detect the animation startup was missing, or the person was doing something that was predicted correctly, and so the divergence was saved in that case. So that's kind of how it works there. So hopefully that makes a little more sense. Okay, so Wendy says, does the frame data change much when one person has a bad connection? No, not really. And it kind of rolls back to the game just plays. It doesn't really care. If it gets load stated, it doesn't really matter. In delay-based, pure delay-based netcode, your perception of the frame data changes, though, because the game will stutter. It'll stop and pause for a frame, or it'll speed up for a frame. You know, it adjusts. It gets kind of wonky. It starts to give variances. And so if your body is tuned to, I'm doing this combo, and 3 frames later I gotta press this button, and 5 frames later I gotta press this button, or whatever it happens to be, you're gonna feel that, because it's either not gonna work, or it's gonna feel weird because what you expect to see on the screen doesn't match up with what your muscle memory tells you, and things like that. So it just feels wrong, it feels off. And worst case scenario, often the case, you just drop the combo because the delay changed so much that the window of opportunity for you to press that input is just completely different than whatever your offline muscle memory is going to be. And yeah, so the perception of frame data might change, and that might be where you're thinking of that, where the delay kind of changes the windows of opportunity, but it's really just the game pauses for a frame. But when you see a pause for a frame, you don't even notice it. It'll still render it. It just won't advance the gameplay for that frame. It's very hard to detect those. You'll feel something's wrong, but you may not really catch what happened. So hopefully that makes sense. But I can see where your mind went to that, because it kind of feels like that's the case, but it's just weird. It's just pausing the game and it's messing the timing up. Oh. All right, let's see. I've got some more questions from Twitter. Oh, here's a big one. Platinum Soul on Twitter asks, during the development cycle of a game, when is the best time to implement GGPO? And another question related to it, Andrea Jens. Now, he was posing this question. I know Andrea. He does the Short Splits game. He knows the answer to this question, but he was stating it to kind of give me some guide, give me some questions that he think people would ask. So he says, if I want to add rollback to my game, when should I start thinking about it? Can I add it after my game is in a playable state? So yeah, here's the thing. We talked about this a little bit. You want to do this as soon as possible during your engines, because you get into the thing where Tekken tried to do it after the fact, and look what happened. They only got 3 frames of rollback. They couldn't get it to go anymore. You know, if you don't plan for it right up front, you could make decisions later that make it incredibly hard to go back and add it. And sure, NetherRealm Studio powered through it with all their money and their staff. They said, hey, we're going to have a team of 8 dedicated people, and we gave them almost a year to redo the entire game. A lot of places don't have those resources, or are not willing to put in the money to do that. NetherRealm's got big bucks, like big bucks. I think they're only outsold by Smash Brothers. And the gap between Smash Brothers, NetherRealm, and the rest of the FGC and fighting game developers is astronomical. Like, Mortal Kombat and Smash is so far ahead in sales. It's insane. So NetherRealm's got the bucks. They can spend it. They're not feeling it. They don't really care. They can go out and say, you know what, we're just going to do it because we want to do it. Who cares if it costs X amount of millions of dollars? We've got plenty of millions to spare. But you're not going to find that with a lot of developers. So you have to get it as early as possible. Now, I thought, in all my infinite wisdom, I thought, oh, hey, okay, I get the idea. I know how to separate render threads from the rendering from the update. I understand that concept. I've worked in my own engines before. You know, I got all that down, and that's all great. But the one thing that I miscalculated, and I went ahead and I started building Pocket Fighter EX with the plan of, oh yeah, we're going to add rollback, and it's going to be great, and I got it in mind, and we're not going to have any problems. I didn't understand determinism completely, and I didn't realize that Unity wasn't deterministic. And I've been spending over a year now trying to make Unity deterministic. So I'm in there. I'm in there with Bandai Namco and the rest of them, figuring it out after the fact. Had I known, now it still would have been an incredible amount of work to make this work right the first time. And it's going to set me back an additional set of months to get everything, set up. And thankfully, my project's not that complicated compared to some others. So I'm still doing relatively okay, but there's other games that are just complete. They've got all their characters, they've got all their modes, they got everything, and then you look at it and it's like, yeah, I can't do that. And Andrea, who sent one of the questions, like I just said, he's in that situation. So his Schwarzwitz game is kind of like a Tekken-like indie game. And we got talking, and we joined the GGPO Discord, and we started dissecting all this stuff, and he came to the conclusion, he's just like, it's just way too much work. There's no way I'd be able to get this to work right. He said, I have to do it in a new engine. So whenever I make my next game, then I can think about, building it. But it's still a pain, because it's like, really nice if I could just use my old engine, but you can't. And that's what I said before. Well, fighting games cut costs by reusing at least pieces of an engine, if not the whole thing, for their next project. And they build upon it, build upon it, build upon it. They don't want to start over. That costs way more extra money to start over. But you have to add rollback properly. So, yeah. That's the sort of catch-22. So, yeah, as early as possible is the short answer. You do it absolutely as early as possible, because determinism is a big killer, and also making sure that you decouple your rendering. Changing those things after the fact would be huge, gigantic rewrites. Yeah, there's a GGPO Discord. Yeah. I don't know what the link is to it, but I assume you could just Google it or something, or if someone can pull a link up, that would be helpful. But be forewarned, it's the nerd zone. You go in there and we're talking about floating points. We're talking about, programming and threads and all this other stuff. So if you pop in there and everything's way over your head, I warned you ahead of time. But hey, if you stick around, there's a lot of people there that will help you and kind of get you up to speed too. So you're getting thrown into the lion's den, but we do throw you a cut of meat every now and then. But it's definitely the nerd zone, so just be careful. And that's me. I'm nerd. I'm part of nerd zone. That's me. I'm not making fun of them. I mean, I kind of am, but I'm making fun of myself at the same time. You get it. I'm in the nerd zone. Hey, there it is. Thank you, 2-Hit Matt. There's the link, I think. Nope, bad link. Well, maybe we'll get it. Okay, so, oh yeah, okay, and then Crimson Guitarist also submitted a question that was relative to this. He says, what should I prioritize early on in development to ensure my game is easy to put rollback into? And that kind of goes back to do it as early as possible. Start thinking about everything as early as possible. But the thing that I would do is the thing I've got right here. Don't worry about hooking up GGPO. Don't worry about the internet. Don't worry about networking. You can test rollback just right in the game itself. Just make a rollback test, like what it's doing right now. All these objects are getting save stated and load stated, and they're getting run through the decoupled update loop. All this is being tested locally on one computer, on one game. You don't have to have it multiplayer. I can stop and analyze, the data between these steps, and I've got all these stats to help me out, and I can analyze the states, see what matches and what doesn't. So you want to do a local save state, load state, rollback test in your game without hooking it up to GGPO. Because if you hook GGPO in and you hook the internet in, it adds all these extra layers of complication, and it makes it harder to find those glitches. But if you can get like a replay system going and then attach rollback to that replay system, or just do a rollback test like this to test the individual data components and all that, that will help you out so much. And you should start doing that right away to understand what's going on in the system, where you are, what the issues are that are going to pop up. Again, you're going through those growing pains. You're going to find a ton of issues, a ton of things that you never thought of. I find new stuff every day and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense, but I would have never thought of that until I ran into it. So that helps out. And then if you have it in this like test environment, you can squash those bugs before you start actually applying it to a real game. And that makes it a lot easier to find the bugs, let me tell you. The chat says, what would it take for you to stop working your current job and develop games full time? Or is that even a goal? Well, all right. So it's not quite a rollback question, but I'll answer it. Stop working your current job and developing games full time. It's mostly a money thing. I mean, right now I'm doing a fan game, not making any money on it. So it is what it is. I do what I can with it, and it is what it is. But it's a dream project, right? So there are some sacrifices I'm willing to make to do a dream project. It's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, and eventually, yeah, I would like to do game development full time. So yes, it's a goal, and my other projects that I work on are toward that end. But this one in particular, it's, I can't sell it, and that's fine. I mean, I know that, I acknowledge that, that's all right. I'm willing to make that sacrifice to make the game my dream game, so to speak, in that regard. So a little bit of both. I don't have any goal to turn this game into something sellable because I can't, and it's it's Capcom and SNK's characters and all that, but I have other projects that are geared toward that. Can you briefly explain your determinism setup in Unity? The TLDR is anything that needs to be deterministic has its own component. So here with the player, it's actually a very good explanation. If you're familiar with Unity, there's a transform component on every game object, and you can't remove it. It's always there. It's the position, the object's position in the world. This is not deterministic. These use floats. So how do I get around that? I make a helper script that works with transform, and it's called transform fixed for fixed point numbers. Now those are deterministic. And what I do is I do all my position changes in transform fixed, and then that automatically pushes the update to transform. So it keeps Unity in sync. But all my important calculations are going to run through transform fixed. So it's like it's an assistant component. It's a middleman between my perfect deterministic math and Unity's not so deterministic math. And as long as I do all my calculations with transform fixed and do all my collision checks with transform fixed and all those deterministic components that are sort of like replacements for Unity's components, then everything should be fine. And I just have to do that for everything that I want to happen. Now, custom scripts like player scripts and all that, they can be built from the ground up with deterministic math because, you can write the script however you want. But things like transform or things like, box collider 2D or things like rigid body, I have a rigid body fixed. So here, I got rigid body, but rigid body 2D fixed configures rigid body, and when I need to do something with a rigid body, I go here first, and I do all my calculations here, and then it will tell rigid body what I did and what I wanted to do, and if it needs to update anything on my behalf. But everything has to be through these fixed things. So it's like having little assistance for Unity's features that either bypass Unity's features completely, or they assist Unity in acting in a deterministic way, kind of acting like that middleman. And that's the concept that I permeate through the entire system. And then so we have like save state stuff. This is also, you know, for the rollbacks you need the save state, load state, so I built that system, but it's just a component in Unity. And then here's my update on demand. This is my rendering agnostic update loop. So whenever I need to call an update, that's why it's called update on demand, I just tell it, hey, go ahead and update all the objects. Every object that's got this script, it can start to implement these updates into it. Will VOD this be released on YouTube? Yes. So it will automatically be saved onto the YouTube channel. I'm gonna do an edited version too, in case there's anything we need to speed up or cut out or whatever, or, you know, if the computer crashes and I have to come back, you know, in like 10 minutes, I'll snip them together, whatever, you know what I mean? But yeah, the raw VOD of every live stream is automatically up on YouTube forever. It's just gonna be up there. So how would you test rollback, simulate bad networks? That's a whole other thing. That's when you get into actually setting up with a networking, but you don't really have to do that to test your rollback. And that's what I was saying here. This is doing a rollback test automatically. It's not hooked up to a multiplayer situation. It's just simulating a rollback. It goes back in time 7 frames, and it updates the game up back to current time. And everything's working out okay. Everything looks good. Nothing's crazy, skippy, wonky, weird. Nothing goes nuts. And you can do those tests without having to introduce network latency and all that stuff. You want to make sure that core rollback system is working before you take it to the network level. Now, once you get to the network level, there are applications that can simulate bad connections and packet loss and stuff like that. I've seen some people they'll run the game on 2 computers through the LAN, or they'll put one on a VPN and do things like that to test it. But that's kind of like, that's when it's getting into real big details. That's getting into the weeds. It's a little bit out of scope for this discussion. But there are those tools out there. You should be able to find them. If you hit up the GGPO Discord, yeah, 2HitMac got the link there up in chat. They talk about that stuff on there too. You can ask them what tools they use for that. That would be the place I would go. I'm not to that point yet, so I don't know the specific names. I'd have to look it up. But that's actually a good segue into another question that we had. Let's see. Yeah, actually it was the next one anyway. So in one of the, it might be the indie fighting game Discord, Joe and Andrea started talking about the network communications aspect of rollback. And now I'm not going to get too much into detail on this because, again, this is sort of the rollback itself exists without the network being a thing, so it's kind of like an additional topic on top of that. And also, since I haven't gotten to that part yet, I'm not going to swear to know everything about it. But they did have a good few bits that they were talking about. So I'll read the 2 bits that I jotted down here, and then we'll discuss those. So Joe says, I think the important is to understand what the rollback netcode is doing if a TCP network connection will be used for a peer-to-peer then get into how this is done as one becomes a host, the other becomes the peer, if I'm not mistaken, and how to send and receive messages. So I'll address that first. Again, I don't necessarily agree that it's important to get into that aspect, because you're going to swap out this kind of functionality for all sorts of different things. So what I mean by that is the way that you communicate between two players on the PS4 is different than if you did it, say, on Steam. Different if you did it on the Epic Games store. Like, they all have their sort of middleman network connection configurations to deal with, and they're drastically different. So, like, and I know this because the guy High Fight, who makes Footsies, the indie fighting game Footsies, he hooked it up to Epic's network communication library for Epic Games Store, and it was like a completely different experience than Steam and other ones. And of course, you can make your own too. So that topic tends to balloon into, well, what's your specific situation? What's the console you're on? You know, what's the library give you? How is it an abstracted layer of control, or do you have direct access to send the messages? It gets complicated. So I don't think it's productive to necessarily go through all of that, because it's going to be highly dependent on what you're going to do. But you do need to send messages, as we call them, to the other player. And that's the core of it. As long as your rollback system can send out a message and receive a message, then you're fine. And whatever layer of networking code that you have on top of that, that's going to be highly dependent on what your actual release platform is, and whether you're doing crossplay and all this other stuff. So I'm not going to get into all of that. That's a whole other video and a half on its own. And I'm not even to that part yet, so I'm not even sure if I can talk specifically about that other than what I already have. So the follow-up is somewhere in that conversation. Andrea, the Schwarzblitz guy, he says, I think all fighting game netcodes use UDP and not TCP because it's faster, albeit less reliable. And that is absolutely true. So the difference between TCP and UDP, the TLDR, TCP sends a message and then it sends, hey, did you get that? And then the other side of the connection goes, yeah, I got that. Can you send the next one? He goes, yeah, all right, here's the next message. Hey, did you get that? Yeah, I got that. Or maybe, no, I didn't get that. Like, okay, here, I'm going to send it again. Did you get it now? Oh, yeah, I got it that time. All right, you can send the next one. Now, UDP is just sending messages. It's just spamming. It's throwing them out there, and it doesn't care if you get them or not. If you get it, fine. If you don't get it, who cares? We're just going to keep spamming. We're just going to keep sending. Now, you save time there, because you don't have to wait for the other side of the connection to say, oh, hey, I got it, and can you please send the next one? It just keeps sending. And if you get them, cool. And if you don't, well, that's cool too, because I'm just going to keep sending them. I don't care. There are things you have to do to cover those faults. So when you send a UDP, even if you send a UDP package or a message, they might come in out of order. Say I send 1, 2, 3, and you get 2, 3, 1. It's like, oh, okay. Well, if you were expecting them in a certain order, you can't rely on that now. So to go into just a little bit of detail, as far as I'm aware, what you have to do in this case is you have to send a frame number, and you send inputs along with it, right? That's your message. That's going to the next connection, the other side of the connection. I'm sending my inputs, and I'm telling you what frame these inputs need to be on. You know, it's frame 10, here's my input for that. Here's frame 12, here's my input for that. Wait, hold on. What about frame 11? Oh, the message for frame 11 got lost somewhere. It didn't actually get delivered. It's like, okay, wait, hold on. Well, then how are you supposed to know what's on frame 11? I got frame 10 and frame 12, but I don't got frame 11. So here's the dirty trick. Here's the secret. Input data is so small that you can just send a whole bunch of them. In fact, what GGPO does is it will send, say the timeline convergence is on frame 10. Well, frame 11, it sends the input for frame 11. On frame 12, it sends the input for frame 11 and 12. On frame 13, it sends the input for 11, 12, and 13, and so on and so forth. It keeps piling on more inputs, and it'll send like 4 or 5 at a time, every single frame. So if you miss packet 12, if you miss message 12, it doesn't matter because message 13 is going to include the data for 12 in addition to 11 and 13, and it will keep sending over and over and over. And that's how it mitigates the fact that some of these UDP messages are just not going to make it to the other side. That's what we call packet loss, by the way. So that's, if you want to know the technical term for that. And that kind of comes back around to, you know, how do you simulate lag on the network and stuff? There's programs that intentionally cause packets to get lost and stuttering to occur. And that's one good way to test that. But those tools, you have to look up where to get those. I don't have anything on hand for that yet, but it's so far in the future, you won't even get there for a million years, so don't worry about it right now. But I did just want to touch on that because that is an important part of it. Obviously, that's the intention eventually, to get to the netcode, but that gets to be a hairy bit there, right? So, all right, let's look at chat, see what you guys are saying. Ever put any thought into starting an indie game company that specializes in retro remakes for fighting games built in Unity, like the Ultimate Street Fighter 3 port, to rule them all? No, not really. Okay, that's a whole yeah, okay, like digital clips and stuff, right? Yeah, that's a whole big thing. In order to do something like that, you would have to go to Capcom and you'd have to say, hey, we're a studio, we've got this amount of experience, we're doing this and that. We want to port Third Strike to consoles. We want an online, you know, rollback version of Third Strike. You know, here's our credentials. We're confident we can do the work. You make a proposal, Capcom thinks it over, and you do that. It's really complicated. That's business stuff when you get into that. You can't just show up and be like, oh, we're going to do this, and Capcom's just going to give us the license. It doesn't really work that way. Capcom's going to review it, and they'll decide whether they want to do it. I mean, because Capcom's going to have to pay for some of the marketing, the publishing, and then you've got to pay to get the license to do it, and it's a whole big thing. I'm not really interested in that, to be honest. So if I were to go on, am I distant from the mic? I think the microphone might be dying because I have not moved an inch. Here, hold on a second. Okay, I amped up the microphone settings, so hopefully that solved it. But yeah, I think, because remember where the where notifications and stuff were getting eaten up? I was talking about the ports being bad on my thing. 200% louder. Oh no. I think the microphone jack is getting screwed up too. I think the whole system's just dying on me. It's killing me. Hey, we want to release Third Strike again. Yeah, really? Hey, I would love add rollback to the microphone. I would love to see Third Strike Online just get ported. Just port it to the PS3 or 4. The audio isn't peaking, you're good. Okay, good. Yeah, I have two different microphone settings that I use. One for when I'm not super close to the microphone, like when I'm playing a game. And then one when I'm close to the microphone, which I am now. I haven't moved. The microphone hasn't moved. The microphone's just wonky. I swear to God, this equipment's gonna die on me some point, and it's gonna be hell to replace it. Street Fighter Alpha 3 port, yeah, right. Yeah, people want Alpha 3 Max, right? Alpha 3 Max with rollback? Ooh, would that be something? My fantasy is for Third Strike HD remix, completely redrawn sprites. I don't know. See, here's the thing. All right, look. All right, we're getting off track here, but I'll give you the TLDR. Capcom does not have the two-dimensional talent to pull off that kind of thing. It's just not possible for them. They just don't have the people to do it. And to do that kind of workload with the same kind of frame rate in HD, hand draw and all those things over again, they're not gonna pay for that. There's no way. It'd be way too expensive. They don't have the people to do it to begin with, and it'd be way too expensive to do it. I can't imagine a single studio on the planet that would A, be interested in doing it, and B, even have the means to do it. It would be great, but it's not gonna happen. It's just not. They'd have to cut a lot of corners, and then it just would look worse than the original Third Strike, and nobody wants that. Yeah, sprite artists are becoming rare too. Yeah, the whole 2D sector, they just lost all those people. You know, like Akimon left Capcom a long time ago, and Capcom still got a death grip on the documents that Akimon left them. They have not evolved past that point. And in fact, they can barely execute on what was there. They look at it in hopes and that there's a glimmer of something that they can glean from it. And it just doesn't live up. They've regressed in that manner severely since that time. But they kind of fired all the 2D guys and downplayed them and shifted them around because they're like, 3D is the future. We don't need these guys anymore. So Akimon's like, you know what? I'm going to move on. I'm going to go somewhere else. And some of the OGs are still there, but they don't have the sway to do that kind of thing anymore. That era's gone, unfortunately. They'd have to rebuild their staff to get to that level, and that would take years to get everybody trained and experienced up to what they were. But Capcom was on something else in the late 90s, man. It was something else. And it's gone now. It's just gone. You told her right about the price. I briefly thought about tracing over Chun-Li's sprites, and then I realized there are 1,400 frames. Yeah, 1,400 frames. I don't know if that's actually accurate. Maybe there's some duplicates there, but it's a lot of frames, though. I don't know what the exact count is, but it's a lot of frames, and they put a lot of work into it. And then it's lightning in a bottle, and they'll never do it again. It's unfortunate, but it'll never happen again. It's totally worth it. Art, yes. It would be great. I'm not saying that I wouldn't want to see it. I'm just saying we're not gonna see it. But yeah. So, I mean, I'm out of questions now. Unless you guys got other stuff from me in chat. I took everything off of Twitter and Discord, and I grouped the common questions together. But that was pretty much all I had stocked up. So now it's free for all. You just shoot and I'll answer. I feel that working on my own platform fighter passion project, and it's already difficult to animate just the normals. Yep. And then you figure out, oh, that move doesn't work the way I thought it was, and now you got to reanimate it and adjust it and change it. Sometimes changing the hitbox is not enough. Oh, and I know that one. Strong art is expensive and rarely appreciated in its own era. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like, Capcom was just kind of letting them do whatever they want at that point because they had the money. The Street Fighter 2 money's rolling in, and they're just like, hey, whatever. We're going to bankroll everything Street Fighter. Just do it. Hey, you want to make 1,400 frames of animation per character? That's fine. We got the money. Just do it. And then when Street Fighter 3 bombed, all that money got pulled back, and they're like, hey, we're not doing that anymore. So yeah, and it wasn't appreciated for what it was. And unfortunately, it disappeared. A Darkstalkers game with the people who worked on Skullgirls would be great. That would be a good fit, yeah. Or Streets of Rage 4. I don't know if the Streets of Rage 4 people have that kind of Darkstalkers vibe to them. But they could absolutely make a fighting game in general. I think that they would be able to pull that off. I'm not the biggest fan of the animation in Streets of Rage 4, but it's substantially better than a lot of stuff out there, so yeah, you could absolutely do that. Let's see, so what about characters? What are good ways to make a good one? Can you be a little more specific with that question? What parts of the character development do you want me to comment on? I remember Harada explaining Tekken animation makes it hard for rollback. Do you know what he might have meant by this? I think, honestly, playing back the animations in a deterministic way and being able to roll them back and all that probably takes a lot of CPU power. And it's just so overwhelming to the PS4 that they could only squeeze out 3 frames of rollback on it. That would be my guess as to what he's talking about. That would make sense based on what I know about rollback systems and that kind of stuff. It takes a lot of processing power to update the game that many times. If you got all the networking theory down and the rollback working locally, are you going to run with GGPO or roll your own networking solution? I'm going to take GGPO and enhance it. GGPO in its current form, as it is given, you know, in its MIT license form, it's kind of more geared for like emulation, and that's what it was originally designed to do, because that was the testing ground. The emulator was kind of the easy way to make sure the game was deterministic and getting the save state and load state functionality out of the way. So they could just attach UGPO to the emulator, and then the emulator would just do its thing, right? And it's structured internally for that kind of process. So there are going to be some things I'm going to have to change in it, and maybe I'll make enhancements along the way. And it's also only in C++ or C, and so I'll have to port it to C#, and so there's going to be some modification, but the core of it's still going to be GGPO. How do fighting games detect desyncs without sending the entire game state over? Okay, so here's the thing that's really cool that you can do when you have a save state. You can turn that into a hash code, and so a hash code is kind of like a unique numerical representation of the entire game state. And so you would just do that on both ends, and you would say, are the numbers the same? If the numbers are not the same, then obviously the states are not correct, and they're desynced. And so you'll have to close the connection. And that's how you can find your desyncs too, by debugging and figuring that out. Now, it can get really hairy if you make a complicated save state system. Might be a little harder and a little more nuanced to figure out where those desyncs are. Because you may have some information in your save state that you need to have because it makes the rollback less apparent. You know, it smooths out some of the bumps, the visual glitches, but that data may not be present in the other player's save state, so that can get really complicated. But like on an emulator state where it saves everything about the entire game and the visual state all in one, you could just run a hash on that, get your hash number, and if it's the same number as the other guy, you're reasonably certain that it's the same state. And that's how they compare that kind of stuff. That would be the quickest way to do it, because then you're just sending one number to the other player. You don't have to send the entire game state to be analyzed, because that could be a lot of data. I was blown out of the water when I learned the new Skullgirls character cost $250,000. Yeah, right. As Larry says, that's the price of good hand-drawn animation, and yeah, and they're probably cutting corners on it too, budget-wise, which is a staple of the game industry, unfortunately. When you work in animation, you work for the love of animation, not for the paycheck, because you ain't getting paid jack. Yeah, characters in fighting games are usually pretty expensive. Yeah, yep. Advanced animation compression might mean that they would have to roll back to the start of the animation to get it to play back or back to any frame. Yeah, that's I've experimented with that too, and that is much more costly. You're right. In order to get everything set up, if you can't save state every position of every bone and everything in the animation, yeah, you would save the animation name that was last started, and then you would load that animation as though you were playing it for the first time, and then you fast forward it in an additional amount of frames to get it to where it needs to be, and then you start updating the game frames. Yeah, it gets complicated, but you could do that. But it would be more expensive to the processor to do that. Cheap anime episodes come in around that price. Yeah. Hey, we saw what happened when cheap anime episodes hit Dragon Ball Super. Hey, Peeper. What are you doing? Hello? Yeah, Burr. What are you doing? Coming to sit? Oh. You got in a fight. I see your scab. Peeper got in a fight with another chicken, and they hit her little crown. I guess I call them the crowns, a little red thing on their head. She's got a little blood scab on it. Poor chicken. Who are you fighting? Did you win? You better win. You better have won. Yeah, she's getting pissed off because I'm yelling. Chicken. She sits on the back of my chair sometimes. Okay, so let's see. We'll catch up here. In the future, could there be anything better than GGPO? Absolutely. I think that technology is going to be advancing as we go forward. I think the next big thing might be more automated and nuanced state syncing that might go past using just the inputs. But that's going to highly depend on how the internet infrastructure around the world changes. Now, like things like Parsec is fine if you have like a gigabit connection and you're playing with somebody next door. But if the internet gets fast enough where everybody has that, and it's virtually instantaneous lag around the world, you could technically just use Parsec for everything. And it would be fine, and it would be just as good as Rollback, if not better. But you have to have the connection to support that kind of thing. So, yeah, the technology will change over time, but I think right now, at least in the immediate future, you're not going to find anything better. And that's because the internet around the world is so different for different regions. It's really bad in a lot of spots. I learned in Filament's Rollback article that some things must be animated a certain way so that they still look smooth when they roll back and frame skips happen. Yes, that's absolutely true. We watched a video at the beginning of this segment that kind of went over some of that stuff. So if you want, check out the VOD. You're on Twitch now, but we got the YouTube channel. You can check the link down below, or just Google Game Dem Scrubs. The VOD will be on YouTube forever, and you can check back and take a look at the first part of this presentation. And then that video from Korea Gaming, that goes over some of the bits of that. So it's kind of like you animate characters so they don't move too fast within the first like 3 frames of their animation and things like that, or like sudden changes in game visuals, like the KO popping up on the first frame of the KO happening in Third Strike, you know, can give you a KO, but then it gets rolled back and it really didn't happen, but you saw the KO, and you could delay that. You can say, okay, the KO ends up showing 7 frames after a confirmed KO, and then, you know, at that point the rollback really only goes up to like 7 frames anyway, so you're fine, you're good. At that point it's pretty safe to just show that KO screen now. So keeping those things in mind is important for the rollback to be presentable to the player, but it doesn't really have anything to do with how the rollback works on the inside. But it's things you should think about if you're going to build a game with rollback as opposed to retrofitting it. How long have I been working on my project? Since November 2017. It's been a while. I don't, you know, it's not a full-time thing, so it takes a while. How's the rollback going? Hey, right here. Where's my mouse? Here's my mouse. Right here. He's a moving, he's a grooving. It's going. It's going. I still got a lot of animation stuff to fix up, and I've been making a lot of efficiency improvements. So what's going? Let's see. Super excited to watch the VOD tomorrow. No, you don't have to wait till tomorrow. It's right here. It's right here today. You can actually rewind the YouTube stream while it's playing and watch it from the beginning, like right now, if you want. That's what I really like about the YouTube streams. It's very handy. You think there could be a software similar to Parsec, but instead of video inputs, it just sends the game. It just sends the game inputs. I'm not sure I understand that question. I mean, if you're just sending the inputs, that's just delay-based netcode. And if you add rollback on top of that, then you'll get the rollback netcode. But you have to see the game somehow. So if Parsec doesn't send the video back, how are you supposed to see the game? You'd have to have it installed, and it would have to play like a normal game. Super excited to watch VOD tomorrow. Oh, I already read that one. Let's see. Like a matchmaking software would rollback that could work for any game. Well, that's the thing. You can't just can't just wave a magic wand and rollback just happens on a game. It really does have to be built for it. Or you have to build a program that manages the game in order to do it. But that's a very specific process. That is a case-by-case thing. You can't just magically apply a generic rollback to any program. Be very careful how you approach that. To be very specific on how to make that work properly. Your rollback models has only one player. Does it change with 2 players? The basic concept of adding rollback to the system and enabling rollback in Unity, the way that I'm doing it, doesn't really matter if it's 1 player, 2 player, whatever is there. It's just, at this point, it's about getting the individual data components to work correctly. And once they all work correctly, I can apply them to creating characters and backgrounds and special effects and all that stuff. I'm getting the low-level systems done first so that I can use that to build the game, and then it'll just have rollback built in. Seeing the game is for scrubs. Yeah, you gotta play blind, man. Yeah, what if Parsec only transmitted the sound? Huh? How about that? How about that? So will you be hosting Pocket Fighter EX tourneys once you add rollback? I would love to have Pocket Fighter EX tourney. That would be great. I mean, I would feel weird about participating in it myself because it's like, okay, I made the game, so it's kind of like an unfair advantage. But I would absolutely love to see a tournament about it. That would be great. If so, I hope people are ready to get bodied. Keyboard King will never falter? Wait, who's Keyboard King? Then it would be like computer matches for Dragon Ball GT. I don't get the joke. What's the joke? Keyboard King's the one and only? Okay, I'll take your word for it. Yeah, I'd be stoked to see Pocket Fighter EX tournament. That would be great. Like that's like a dream level accomplishment. How would rollback work in games that have more than 2 players? Do you roll back based on all the inputs? Would you be able to gain efficiencies in, say, 2v2 Tag Fighter, which has 4 active players contribute, or 2 active players contribute to the state? Well, okay, so here's the thing. A peer-to-peer connection, which is what fighting games typically use because of the fastest connection between players, it works up to a certain amount of players. You probably wouldn't be able to get a smooth connection past 4 players. So what you would have to do, like in a 2v2 game, all the players would have to be in sync, and they'd all have to be actively contributing to the state. They would just, when one character's tagged out, they just, their inputs just don't do anything, but they still have to send the data. They still have to stay in sync. And you could probably get up to 4 players to do that. Otherwise, the rollbacks would just be just spamming, because you're multiplying the complexity every time you add a character or add a player to that system, and now you're getting 4 divergent timelines instead of 2, and yeah, it gets really crazy. What do I do for a living? Will you go full-time in Pocket Fighter EX once the engine is fleshed out? Well, Pocket Fighter EX not making me any money, so there's no full-time to go in there. I do, but my really what I went to school for was IT and programming, and so I've been pretty much on the IT track for most of my quote-unquote career. I tried to do some full-time game development. It didn't work out too well, so I had to go back to IT. Right now, with my arms and elbows screwed up, I'm doing whatever I can to survive. Doing odd jobs here and there, and just living slim. If you use 2 custom characters in tournament mode for Dragon Ball GT, all you see is a black screen and you hear the combat noises before someone dies? Whoa, that's wild! Oh, 2 CPU controlled characters. Okay, I see the correction. Explaining the joke from earlier. Yeah. Hey, if you do want to support my personal efforts in game development, for everything that I do and the streaming and all that, I do have a Patreon. Put that plug right in there. And if you want to empower me to do more, that's the place to go. Do you know any good resources for Rollback and Game Maker Studio 2? I do not. We touched a little bit on it before, and I've never used it myself, but I know some people do. If you hit up the GGPO Discord, you might be able to get some answers out of the guys there. Because there's a few of them that do use it. I don't know if they've, come to full term with it, or if they're just experimenting with it, but that would definitely be the place to go. And let's see, where's the link for that now? Oh, it's up there. Scrolling. Where is it? Oh, we've been talking a while. Oh, here it is. That should be the GGPO Discord link. If it's not, I apologize. What? What is your problem? What are you freaking out about? Here, come here. Chicken break time? Come here. Chicken break. Chicken break. This is the full-grown one. What are you screaming for? You just wanted to get held. That's what it was. You wanted to get fiddled with. Yeah, now you're quiet. Now you're happy. Brr. Yeah, this is Peeper, the full-size grown one now. What? What do you want? What? Cluck cluck. What do you want? You're gonna take off? You're putting your wings up. You think you're gonna fly away? No? Okay. Go on. Go on. Alright. Oh, you're already there. Well, go ask the Game Maker guys. I don't use the Game Maker. What, Peeper? What? I don't know, I'm sure you can hear her in the background. I know Rivals has Rollback. I guess that's Rivals of Aether, I think you're talking about. They're adding it to it, right? Like it wasn't there to begin with, if I understand correctly. Maybe I'm mixing it up with another one. There's so many platform fighters now, I can't keep them together. Do you think they could put Rollback in KOF 13 like they did the older games? Not right now, no. So we went over this earlier, that in order to take an old game and add Rollback, there's two. You either brute force it, which you need a ton of processing power to do, or you have to go back and reprogram it. They're not going to go reprogram it. It would cost way too much money. SNK is not going to bankroll that. They probably don't even have the bankroll to do that. And the other way, brute forcing it, it's too recent of a game. Even with a high-powered computer, I think you'd still have trouble doing that. So there's no way that they'd be able to get that even running on like a PS5. It just wouldn't have the horsepower to brute force it. And that's where we talked about decoupling the rendering from the updates. You don't get that with older games. You would have to either reprogram it to do that, or you'd have to brute force it so that it just plows through the rendering at 7 times the speed, and it's just not likely to happen. Not right now. Eventually it could, but right now we just don't have the horsepower for it. So it being sprite-based doesn't change anything? Not really in this situation, no. It doesn't really have much of an effect on it. It's still, even though it's sprites, they're high-res sprites, and they do so many special effects and like after images and stuff. It just, they would have to just plow through it. Yeah. It's not so much the fact that the visuals are 2D or 3D, it's the fact that there's visuals at all on every frame. If they could somehow separate out the code so that the visuals don't have to get painted to the screen on every frame, then they'd be able to do it. They should be able to have enough power to retrofit it if they wanted to do it properly by reprogramming the game. But I highly doubt that it's gonna happen. At least not anytime soon. You know, something that just came to mind, Ghost of Tsushima uses a lot less power and resources than other games on PlayStation, and it's lighter than others. So why do devs like putting in heavy development in games? Because you want to maximize, generally, you want to maximize what you're working on. So when Sakurai makes a Smash Brothers game, he's like, I want to cram everything I can possibly. I want 1 million Pokemon. I want assist trophies. I want stages that flip upside down. I want 8 characters on the screen. I want everything. And because it's cool. Who doesn't want 1 million Pokemon in Smash? Who doesn't want cool stages? Who doesn't want 8-player Smash? Like, that's great. And pushing the boundaries of the hardware is just, it's just something that developers naturally want to do. But if you do that, and then you want to put rollback into it, you'll have too much stuff's going on. You can't shrink that down on the same hardware and get it to run the same way. You'd have to make some sacrifice somewhere. As far as Ghost of Tsushima's performance, that might be more due to the fact that there's a PlayStation and a PlayStation Pro than there is anything else. So what they probably did is they probably used less power, quote unquote, and resources so that it would work on the base model PS4 without problem. And then the PS4 Pro would just, it would just run that much better, I guess. That's most likely the reason that they did that. But under normal circumstances, if all the console revisions are the same, there wouldn't be any reason to not maximize the power on it. Would rollback be easy to brute force into PS1 and Dreamcast era games? We've seen it with Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and Plus R, but not much else after the 16-bit generation. Both yes and no. So the Marvel 2 would roll back on 360. Like, they had the ability to get into the game and edit the game to do that. And the PlayStation ones, at this point in time, you could emulate the PlayStation ones fast enough that you could just brute force the rollback. But the Dreamcast probably is going to be a little trickier. I know people are experimenting with having that kind of stuff with Dreamcast emulators, but it's still, Dreamcast is a pretty heavy thing to emulate, and I don't think we're going to see it quite for a bit yet, unfortunately. Because brute forcing it is really brute forcing it. You just have to have an overwhelming amount of horsepower to throw at it. And Guilty Gear Plus R, Accent Core Plus R, or XX Accent Core Plus R, whatever. Big long name, Super Turbo Syndrome. That one, they had the control to get to the source code and to make those changes. So that one's not brute forced. It was actually very well, when it was just a mod for the Steam version, they intelligently went in and started manipulating the executable of the game. And that's a little different than just straight up brute forcing it. It's kind of a hybrid. So that was a smart way to do it to begin with. But once they got officially licensed to make it for real, they were able to get the source code for it and then make a much cleaner version of that. But that's why it runs so well. If they tried to brute force it, it would probably be a little rough. But anything after that, yeah, you're not going to be able to brute force it. It's just not going to work. We just don't have the power. What are some things I should optimize before adding Rollback? Everything. It depends on what your engine you're working in is and what code language you're working in. Optimizations are going to be very, very specific to your game and your platforms. So you'll have to do the research on that to figure out exactly what's good and what's not good to do. So for instance, in C#, garbage collection is a big issue. And if you create a list or an array, that causes garbage collection. So what you want to do is like never delete a list or array if you can help it. At least not something that runs every frame, right? And so that's a specific thing for that, but you don't have that problem in C++. Garbage collection is done manually, so it can vary wildly depending on what you're doing. Gotta run, glad I dropped in. Good luck with the project. Looks like it's going well. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So we're probably not getting any graphic intensive 9th gen fighters with Rollback for a while. Not unless I want to reprogram them. Excuse me. Hold on. Okay, had to blow the windpipe out. Yeah, so like Dragon Ball FighterZ is a good example. They've interviewed him and they've asked, hey, can you add Rollback to it? You know, we really want Rollback, and they're like, probably wouldn't work, you know, with this game. Maybe in the next iteration, if we ever make a second one, then we can look into it then. But it's just way too much work to go back and to redo it at that point. And there's no way in hell you're going to brute force a game like Dragon Ball FighterZ into Rollback. It's just not feasible. At least not with the current level of technology. MK11 is pretty graphically intensive, isn't it? And it has Rollback. Strive 2, yes. Although they're running on, you know, pretty powerful machines, and they planned for it. So this is the whole thing. If you plan for it ahead of time, you can make smart optimizations and smart cuts and figure out what you can and can't do with it. Also, the other thing that helps fighting games with graphic rendering is the fact that you're not rendering like a whole world. You're just rendering the stage and what you can see and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot less going on in a fighting game. That's why they can pack more detail too into fighting games, into their art direction and all that, because there's less things on screen having to render at the same time. Instead of like a game like Halo, you know, you got to render the whole map, the sections that you can see, the characters, dudes running around everywhere, explosions going off, you know, you don't know where they're going to be and this and that. And it makes it a lot more intensive and a lot more complicated to have a camera that can move around an environment and have different levels of detail on things. So it's like, oh, in a fighting game, if we have an explosion go off in the far background, you don't have to be very detailed with that, because nobody will be seeing it that close, or they won't even, they couldn't get up next to it at all, and you know, they're focusing on the fight and all that, so that's gonna have a low level of detail, and it never has to have a high level of detail, and you don't have to manage that. There's a lot of a lot of tricks that go along into that. They save so much by not having a giant level out there that they can give higher detail, like the characters and stuff. So yeah, that's a good time to ask what exactly the source code is in the game. The source code is just the code behind the game. So we call it source code because it is the source of the program before it gets compiled. And when it gets compiled, it gets turned into basically binary ones and zeros. And it's not humanly readable at that point. But, well, let's just click this here. It's going to take a minute to load. There you go. This is source code. It's just the code that runs the game. And here's my physics 2D fixed manager. So you get a little sneak peek at all the mumbo jumbo. Here's my update on demand. Oh, this is the middleman controller. This is the one that calls the update to happen. And I can set it to run an update, fixed update, late update, whatever. Wow, I actually hit the times up? That's fine, we're still here. Oh no, that was only the first playlist. Okay, I loaded up 2 playlists just in case. So, now we're still going. We're still going strong, it's fine. As long as you guys are here, I'm here. Until I, like, pass out or lose my voice. Actually hurt my throat. That's alright. I got a few days to rest from streaming. I'm not back till Thursday, so if I run my voice into the ground, I'll be fine. Hydrate or dehydrate. Yeah, that's true. But I drink more water than like anybody throughout the day. But when I'm talking on stream, I just forget about it. And talking dehydrates you, so yeah. Now, I don't know what to do for the game I'm making for that contest. Let's see. All this was helpful, but now I'm second guessing myself on what I should do. Well, if you're just doing like a little game jam thing, it may not be realistic to add rollback to that. Especially if you want to get like NetPlay or something, which is kind of what it's really only used for. That might be a bit out of scope, especially if you haven't done it before. Because you're going to run into a whole bunch of roadblocks that you never even thought about. And it's going to extend the dev time. Now, if you make something cool in the game jam, and then you want to take it, and then add in rollback later, you could possibly do that. I mean, that might be a small enough project where it wouldn't be, like, impossible to add it after the fact. But that really depends on how you approach it. I wouldn't normally recommend doing it after the fact. Again, going back to what we had talked about a few times already in this presentation, or whatever you want to call it. You don't want to do that if at all possible. So, any more questions? I got the answers if you got the questions. I feel like we covered a lot of ground though. So I think we did pretty good at explaining and getting through some of this. I'm pretty happy with where this is going so far, the rollback engine in Unity. It definitely has some performance hitches, because you're forcing Unity to do something it wasn't designed to do. But I think in the long run, it will make development a lot easier for me. And then we'll be able to rapidly add things to the game without worrying about it. That'll be nice when that's finally over. I'll have to go back and check the VOD, but this has been very helpful. Well, I'm glad. Yeah, again, on YouTube, you can check it immediately. You don't have to wait for it. And it'll be there forever. The ones on Twitch only last for a certain period of time. So, probably just want to head to YouTube for that. I stream on YouTube and Twitch at the same time, so you don't miss anything. So to recap, Rollback sends data between the two computers in order to update the frames and show what happens. Yeah, it only sends input data for the most part. And it might send like a state check every now and then. Or, well, like when you start the game, it's got to send the characters, like the team, what characters you selected, what color you chose, like that's normal. But the rollback itself is really only concerned with input at the bare minimum. And it doesn't really have to be concerned with much else. Anything else would just be like, oh, let's see if there's a desync by checking the state hashes and stuff. Yeah, you could do that, but you don't have to. Probably be a good idea, though. If you can afford it, because the hashing does take time too. How do you manage sound and physics when it comes to rollback games? That is a whole topic on its own. Very carefully. So the physics are pretty straightforward. You just have to make sure your physics are deterministic. And so particles also would be included in that. You want to make sure that they display in the same pattern every time. And that might, in that case, you might have to roll your own system for deterministic particles and things like that in physics, depending on how complicated you need to get. I made a hybrid system that lets Unity do some of the work, but then I have to do deterministic checks to make sure the collisions actually happened. But if you're going to go into your own engine, you might as well just do your own physics. But that's complicated. Really complicated. Very, very time-consuming, so you have to weigh that option. So for sound, like music can just play, music doesn't need to get rolled back, but sound effects will inevitably at some point have to be rolled back. I saw a video on it once by the Skullgirls developer where they described their system as having the sound system calculates what it thinks should be playing, and then when a rollback occurs it recalculates what that is, and then the actual sound playing system tries to compensate for what the calculated sound system said it should be playing. And then it kind of tries to mitigate that. I think they said stuff like instead of just stopping a sound, that they actually faded it out really quickly over the next few frames instead of cold cutting it and things like that. I haven't really gotten into the sound stuff yet. I dabbled a little bit in it, and I'm probably going to have to do something similar to calculate a expected sound state and not just actually roll back the sounds. Can't particles and most other visual effects just be handled locally without syncing? I think NRS team did something like that. Yes. Well, see, don't confuse it being deterministic with it having to sync between the games. Now, it could sync between the games if you have it deterministic, but it doesn't necessarily have to. And so what I mean by that is that what's really important in the situation with particle effects is that if a rollback occurs, that the particle doesn't just change shape during that rollback. That the particle animation plays the same way every time. And there's usually a lot of randomized bits in there when it does that. And most particle systems are not going to be deterministic. But if you rolled your own, you can absolutely make it deterministic. So it's more, it has no gameplay implication, and it doesn't matter that it would look the same on both screens. I mean, you certainly could, again, but the more important part is for the player that's viewing that specific screen on that side, is that when a rollback occurs, that it doesn't just make the particle look different suddenly. You shouldn't be able to notice that the particle is rolled back at all, but it will get rolled back, and perhaps a couple of times before it even disappears. And that's what you're really worried about with that kind of thing. I think you're right, though. NetherRealm did do something along that line. Yeah. And a lot of it, that's what I was saying before, that you can have a core game state that has all the gameplay relevant information between the two, and if you want to like do a desync test on that data, that's fine, but you're going to have most likely other data that's in there that has nothing to do with the gameplay. It could be HUD data, but you don't need to have HUD data in sync. It doesn't matter. It's just displaying information for one of the players on one side. Or you could specifically have a feature where it only shows up on one side or the other. You know what I mean? Like say the in Guilty Gear Strive, they say how many potential rollback frames can happen at that point in time. Or in the older Guilty Gear games, they'll tell you the delay at the top of the screen. You don't need to show player 2 that. Player 1's delay might be different than player 2. Player 1's rollback frames might be different than player 2. And so that's going to be displayed on each person's screen differently and in different locations on the screen. So you don't want that. That data is not necessary to keep the game in sync, and it's not necessary to keep the visuals looking the same on each side because they're intended to be different. But it's something that you might have to save state and roll back and apply some of these effects to in order to just make it look prettier when a rollback does happen. Things like that. Just not too many use cases for that kind of stuff. But the HUD would be definitely one of them where you would want to do that. The background is another one too. And we saw this in the video. At the very end of the video, do I still have it up? I probably closed it. Let's see. Where is... No, it's closed. Well, at the very end of the Core A Gaming video, they showed where the game froze, and I think it was Tekken 7, and someone hit the ground, and what happened was the characters froze into place, but the ground was still animating, like it rippled out and stuff. You can separate the gameplay from like the backgrounds for that too, and I would recommend doing that. I've been thinking a lot in that direction, where the background doesn't need to be rolled back, and typically, but maybe parts of it do, so you can mix and match, like that ground ripple or you know, where it's breaking apart or whatever. That you might want to roll back, but you don't have to roll back the general animations in the background. Maybe there's like an animated bird or something in the back. You don't need to roll that back. Just let it go. The people won't even notice it anyway. You know, that kind of stuff you can say, you know, I'll only update that once at the end when I'm rendering the frame, and so I don't have to do it 7 times during the rollback. Making those kind of decisions to separate some of the logic out. You know, oh, this is not gameplay dependent. Well, we don't have to update that every frame then. Who cares? As long as it looks fine and it animates and it looks nice, that's fine. You don't need to, you know, update the background like that. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm actually, in Pocket Fighter EX, I'm removing some of the background elements that we're checking every frame to do something. Even during like a rollback, it would check to do something. And you just don't need to. Just check the last frame. Because the game has to advance, right? You can do the rewind time thing, but the game has to advance forward in time. So you're always doing one more frame update at the end before you render the screen. Only update the background on that last one. You don't need to update it on all the other ones. Why bother? That's just wasted resources. So you can make smart decisions like that. And that kind of goes in part with, you know, if you plan it out early, you can get those kind of smart decisions in place, and you can hit those mega efficiencies like that. But if you do it after the fact, you could probably do it, but it would take extra time. And do you have time? Do you have the money to do it? Maybe not. And again, that's probably where Tekken 7 ran into the, well, we've got 3 frames of rollback, but that's all we could afford to do. Because it just, you know, we'd have to change too many things to push it past that. Or decisions made early on before rollback was put in. Just like, we're pushing the hardware too hard. We just can't do it. It's not efficient enough to do it. And it could have been if we did it from the beginning, but well, we're not going to reprogram the entire game to that degree to make it happen, you know? So it's kind of, you run into that kind of thing. So hopefully that answers that question. Here, let me start the other one. I've actually made quite a few efficiencies to Pocket Fighter EX too. I'm working on the project kind of at both ends here. Where Pocket Fighter EX is its own project file, and I'm starting to prepare it for the integration with Rollback, while I'm working on all the rollback components in the blank project to make sure that they all work, and then at some point we'll marry them together, and then they'll work in harmony, and hopefully they'll work pretty good. It's definitely not an easy or quick process, we'll put it that way. And here you go. You can see them. They got cold breath when it's cold out. Look at that. They're breathing little moisture clouds. How about that for detail? And you know what? Here's a good example. How does that relate to rollback? Those little moisture clouds, don't roll them back. Just let them roll. I am the only programmer on the project, but I do get help with music and sprites and stuff. But yeah, see those little moisture clouds? Don't bother. The cold breath? Don't bother rolling them back. Who cares? Who cares? Don't update them every frame. You know, during a rollback, if you're doing more than one frame update, don't bother. Don't do it. Just do it on the last frame. Do it on a normally scheduled update that the game would have had anyway. And then you save all that processing time. And sure, it's probably not a lot, but it adds up. It really does. Or how about this the Kaku Fubatsu indicator here? Let's see, it goes away when I use it. Oh. There, and it comes back when I reload it. Yeah, that doesn't need to get rolled back. Well, I mean, it needs to get turned off if it got turned on by accident. Like if the rollback prevented you from turning it on or using it or whatever. Sure, it has to reappear, but the animation itself doesn't have to update with a rollback. It doesn't have to update 7 times. You won't even see it. It's just HUD. What's the point of it if you don't see it? So just update this animation only in the last frame, right before you render. You know, smart decisions like that can save you a world of hurt. It can really boost your efficiency. I would say that the background in general probably will never get rolled back. Unless it's a very specific situation that looks really wonky. And all the animations and stuff will only get processed on the last frame. Oh, that's not gonna hit. How hard would it be to add rewind feature from press R in recent games? Well, once you have rollback, the rewind feature is pretty much a piece of cake. Because what you're doing is you're just rolling back to a previous state. Now, rollback is essentially you save the state and then you fast forward from there. You can save as many states as you want. As long as you've got the memory to do it, it'll work. So they just save a boatload of states when you use the rewind feature. So say it saves a state every 20 frames. And what they can do is when you rewind, it can go back 20 and up 19, back 20 and up 18, back 20 and up 17. So you're always loading that one marker on the 20 frame count, and then you just simulate up to the point that you need to go. So you don't need to save every frame. You can save every 20. And Street Fighter V, I think they do a similar thing. Yeah, because you can rewind the replays. I'm pretty sure you can rewind the replays. But when you're in the middle of a replay, you're not playing the game. It doesn't need to be responsive. So if it takes 3 or 4 frames to rewind, you know, a frame or whatever, that's fine. That's okay. It does more work, but you're not playing the game, so the latency at that point doesn't matter. Noticing these small optimizations is really cool. Yeah, it's a lot of work though. I've been working on optimizations for like 2 weeks straight, and I'm just finding them and finding them and finding them, and it's like, oh, and it's like, okay, and like it goes back to what I was saying, that the game runs fine on its own. Pocket Fighter EX can run on a potato, but can it run 7 times the speed on a potato? No. No, it cannot. Not in its current form. So, that's the thing. It's, yeah, okay, it runs well, that's fine, but it needs to run well 7 times in 1 frame. And that is tough. That's the stuff that hurts. He's gonna get it. Yeah, how about that? I like that combo. That one's good. Decent stun too. Ooh. And he's dizzy. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, I missed it. I like this one too. Oh, I missed it. Oh no, super jump. Why did I super jump? I'm wearing down now. Oh no, I screwed up. Come on, baby. This is the only game I can do combos in because I play it all the time when I have to play test it and debug it. It's not working. I'm too tired. I'm starting to wind down. Energy's going. Get your questions in now before I have to duck out. Oh yeah, it's almost 11 too. Using all the brain power today. Are those smokestacks in the background from KOF 95 or were they always there? This level was, the original version of this level was taken from the Game Boy Color port of Street Fighter Alpha 1. And so the pixel art in the background, while the smoke and all that, is all from that. I enhanced it. Gave it a better palette. And it made the stage bigger. I think Tim helped with the shed over here. The sideways shed up here, I think he made that. And he added this shed here. So we had to expand it to make the level larger to fit the game. And I added the snow. But the smokestacks were from there. I don't know if they had the red light or not, or if I added that. Do you think devs need to cut some corners gameplay-wise in order to implement good rollback? For example, not making a super fast-paced game. No. No, not at all. Rollback should be fine. You don't have to change that much for it to look good in rollback. So here's the thing. It'll perform in rollback, fine. It will perform in rollback. That's not the question. The question is whether or not it will look really jarring when a rollback happens. There are some things you can do to mitigate that, such as not having the character move drastically within the first 3 frames of an animation or whatever. On paper, that sounds like it could cause the game to slow down, but you absolutely don't have to do that. There would be absolutely ways around it. I consider Pocket Fighter EX to be faster paced than a lot of recent games. And it's not going to have a problem. Yeah, the Hadokens are bugged a little now. They appear behind Ryu. I changed the way that things spawn, and that spawn and point is not correct. The normal Hadokens are fine though. Now slower games have a better time visually coping with a rollback. And I don't know if that's why Strive is that way. I couldn't tell you. I've not seen any interview that says that that's the case. But I don't follow it that closely, so maybe it does. And it definitely would help with it. What's Capcom's excuse? I'll be honest, I think most of the gameplay changes that are occurring right now in the industry are not rollback based. I think they just think that they need to make the game slower because the casual players would be theoretically better able to play the game. That's kind of the trend where they're like, oh, we want accessibility and we want all this other stuff. We want casual players to be better at the game and that kind of stuff. That has nothing to do with rollback. That's just them wanting to change how the game works. Yeah, I think it's a shame that they want to go in that direction. I think, okay, here's my Galaxy Brain analysis of accessibility in video games, or specifically in fighting games. Casual players don't play fighting games competitively because they don't care. They just don't. If you make a good single player mode in your fighting game, that's what's going to get the casual players in the door, and they're going to play that. We played, just this past few weeks ago, we played Street Fighter Alpha 3's World Tour mode. It was cool! You just fight CPU opponents, but you get the level up, and you get crazy abilities. And you just have fun, and that's great, and that's all the casual players are going to play. They don't have to play the online. Funneling them into the online is not going to get them anywhere. Most of them don't want to be there anyway, so why bother? Why would you're just forcing them into something that they don't want to do? Maybe some of them will end up liking it, but if that's all you have to offer, nobody's going to play the game. You're right, and that's why Mortal Kombat's popular. It's got big story modes with cutscenes and all that shit. They treat it like a normal video game. They don't care about fighting other people half the time. And when they do, they fight their friend, who's just as bad as they are, and that's fine, I'm terrible too. We're all terrible. Who cares? That's all I did back in the day. I bought Street Fighter Alpha 3. I just played it with my friend. We were terrible at it, but it was fun. CVS 2, CVS 1, Marvel vs. Capcom, we bought all of them. We sucked at all of them, but it was fun. Most of the time we just played arcade mode. That's all people want. You can try to teach them all the mechanics and all the moves and all this shit. They don't care. It doesn't matter because they don't care. I didn't care back in the day about every single competitive edge in the game. I mean, now I have to be really cognizant of it because I'm designing one, but back in the day, I didn't give a shit. I was like, oh, hell yeah, World Tour? That sounds awesome. It's like RPG mode. Hell yeah. That's what I want to play. I don't give a shit whether Ryu's punch is 3 frames, 4 frames, 8 frames, whatever. It don't matter. I'm usually just throwing out the heavy punch anyway and throwing Hadoukens raw and neutral and don't give a shit. And who cares? No one cares. The casual players just don't give a shit about frame data. They don't give a shit about rank points. They don't care. You have to have those too, sure. They just want to get in there and they just want to play arcade mode and play their friends and whatever. They want to play Subspace Emissary. That's what they want. We'll never get that again. Which is a shame, because that was awesome. Like, I like playing the games competitively to a degree. But I'm still going to go run straight to World Tour. I'm still going to run straight to Subspace Emissary. Those are cool. That's what most people want. I don't care about the rest of it. And for the people who do care about it, it's fine. But we're just talking about the casuals. And not using that term derogatively, just people who aren't invested in the competitive. And that's fine. You play it however you want. But if there's no modes for you, like Street Fighter V launched with a survival mode, and that's it, like, you know, the average player is going to come in there and be like, this game's got no modes, and then they're going to leave. They're going to hit that refund button on Steam quicker than you can. This game sucks. It's got no modes. It ain't not even an arcade mode. Like, what the hell, man? It sucks. Ain't got nothing. So they don't care about going online unless they're playing with friends. I don't know. That's my thing about accessibility. Okay, I'm gonna cue this question after my previous. If you had to go delay based, what's the best option out there for it? In my opinion, if your fighting game only has delay based netcode, it is not worth playing. Online, at least. Just flat out. Just don't even bother. Just let people use Parsec at that point. Save yourself the trouble. Because it's not going to be playable for most everybody anyway. So, I wouldn't even bother. If you don't have rollback, I couldn't expect a single person to play Pocket Fighter EX online unless it has rollback. Like I wouldn't even bother. If somehow rollback was an impossibility, I just wouldn't even bother. There'd be no point to it. The only combo they'll learn is the PlayStation button to quit the game. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you're gonna get that. You're gonna get that. They're gonna go online, they're gonna get their ass kicked, and they're just gonna be like, nah, fuck that. Rage quit. And whatever. I mean, people play games for different reasons. Not everybody's gonna play it to be competitive. That's fine. I never played Street Fighter competitive back in the day. I just thought World Tour mode was cool and arcade mode was cool, and that was it, you know? I would like to play competitively, and I mean, I've gone to locals and stuff in somewhat recent years. I mean, we don't have locals here in Kentucky, but at least where I am. But when I was in New York, I went and I enjoyed it. It was fine. It was great. But it's not for everybody. Not everybody cares about it. And even the guys there, they still like the single player modes. It's a win-win. Like, everybody likes the single player modes anyway. So just put them in. You're pleasing the most amount of people by having interesting single player modes. But these days, you have to have more than arcade mode, I think, to truly satisfy people. I mean, the bar is so low right now that having just an arcade mode will get you some praise. But in the long run, I think, you know, as an industry-wide thing, you need more than arcade mode. You need to bring back the World Tour. You need to bring back the... What was the Soul Calibur one? Master Mode or Weapon Master Mode? Something like that. It was basically the World Tour of Soul Calibur. You know, you have to bring that stuff back. You're not going to survive. You're not going to sell copies. Nobody's going to care unless there's really cool shit in the game. And going online is cool, but most of the people want single player stuff. Just a fact. Hey man, bless the gods of the FGC, Third Strike, Rollback, and Daigo. Yeah. I'm glad that Capcom gave... Was it Backbone Entertainment? Who was it? They changed names or something after a while. Or was it Digital Eclipse, what they used to be? When they made Third Strike Online, I was really surprised that Capcom went through with that. But I was even more surprised that they kind of stopped at that point. I don't know. They were doing their own rollback experiments at that point. I think they understood the results were really good. Up, up, down, down, left, right. Turn the system off. Yeah. Got that down forward PlayStation button. And it sucks that one improvement in a release won't translate to the next release or other franchises. Best example is Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution. I don't know much about Virtua Fighter. I know it's all the rage now because it just came back. But they don't have rollback. And if you live close to one of their servers, you can get a decent connection. But if you don't live close to their servers or you've got crappy internet, then it don't play good. You know, the people are like, oh, connection's great and whatever. It's like, yeah, because you live next to the Google server that they're putting the game on. And you've got God internet. You come out to Kentucky and you try playing Virtua Fighter? No. Good luck. And that's the problem. If you don't have rollback, you're just going to end up in that situation. And hey, cool, great. It works for, you know, the people with the God internet and next to the Google servers. That's wonderful. You can go have fun with that, but there's no way in hell that I could play it. Not here. I mean, I don't play Virtua Fighter anyway, but if I did have an interest in it, I'd be screwed. There'd be no way. No way I could play it here. And that goes for pretty much any delay-based game. I just don't bother playing them anymore. It's just not worth it. If you had to re-implement rollback on Pocket Fighter EX, how long would it take you knowing what you know now? Probably about the same amount of time. Most of the problem right now is that it's just a mountain, an absolute gigantic mountain of work to make rollbacks work in Unity. So even knowing what I know now, it wouldn't save me much time, because the workload's going to be the same. Most of it I had kind of an idea of what I needed to do from the beginning. I just didn't realize Unity wasn't determinist. And I've been trying to mitigate that the entire time. Like, I had non-deterministic rollbacks working already in the project long ago. It's just getting Unity to be deterministic. I started the process of adding rollback in January 2020. So it's been about a year and a half. So I would say, yeah, about a year and a half. I live in Cleveland, so I wonder what my connection would be like. I'm not sure where the Google servers are. People have been making maps on Twitter for Virtual Fighter, so you can check that out. And it might give you an idea of how good it'll play. But I don't know if it will only play good with other people that connect to the same region or the same server. Google has kind of like their own little high-speed mini private network throughout the world, so you might actually get some decent results if you're connected into their thing properly. But think about it this way. Google's internet, Google's private network that they run between their servers all throughout the world can be the fastest thing alive. It could be the Autobahn. It could be the friggin' highway going 100 miles an hour. But the road between you and the highway, you leave your house and you're going 30 miles an hour down the city street before you hit the highway, it don't matter how fast the highway is. If you've got to slow down to get to your spot, to get to your computer, it doesn't matter. It's going to gimp your connection completely. You can't just go 100 miles an hour through a neighborhood. You have to get onto the highway first, and then you hit your speed. But that part of the connection that's not on Google's private servers, that's going to cap it. 1 second you're playing Third Strike on Fightcade, perfectly fine. Next second you're paying us 3,000. There's other things that can influence that too. You know, the distance with a player, but also if they're on Wi-Fi or you're on Wi-Fi, that can cause huge lag spikes like that. Or if their network settings are set incorrectly, or maybe just not optimized, you can have problems like that. Or if they're happening to use a relay or a VPN, all adds time to the trip. That can cause problems. It would be nice if I could find examples of rollback implementation for Unity. Are there any examples on GitHub? Not that I'm aware of. I'm just kind of running blind on my own. Actually, you know, there's one little mini example of a rollback that somebody in the GGPO Discord was working on. If you go to the GGPO Discord, I think he released it or he's about to release it. And he did a small little rollback demo in Unity. I haven't personally looked at it, so I couldn't tell you how good it is. But somebody there worked on one. It's kind of like a little experiment for a few weeks. Now, it probably doesn't implement rollback into Unity itself. It's probably just an isolated gameplay core that has its own rollback solution. And then it's probably just like a tiny little tech demo. So meter your expectations on it, but there is someone that was working on it, and I don't know what he's doing now, though. He's not continuing it as far as I'm aware. He just wanted to just try it. Can we see some Terry combos? Sure. Terry's still pretty broken, so I can only do certain ones. But, yeah, sure. Apparently Japan has 10 gigabit per second Wi-Fi. That's cheaper than most in the US. Like we mentioned before, the bandwidth on Wi-Fi doesn't really matter. You're still gonna get weird stuff. You're still gonna get bad spots because the technology of Wi-Fi was never built with good latency in mind. The whole idea of Wi-Fi is to sacrifice latency for convenience. That's not gonna work. Oh, no, he's bugged out in that one. I don't think I can do any combos from that route because the thing is broken. Rising tackle's broken. And you can do this. Hello, people. What are you doing? Oh, here. How about this one? What one? Power charge got broken too. I can't do any follow-ups right now. I put the floating point math back at normal precision. Let's see, what could I do here? Oh, you know what? Yeah, let's do this. Ooh, there you go. Oh, that's pretty good, over 50. Oh no, is this broke now too? Yep, that's broke now too. Alright, I'm sorry, not too many combo routes right now with all the glitches on Terry. Hey, yeah, you're really late. We're kind of at the tail end here. But you can always rewind the stream on YouTube and start over. Oh no, this is not even close to Terry's max damage. I can't do the big ones because some of the moves are bugged out at the moment. Like, see how this... Oh wait, hold on. Heavy works, huh? Yeah, I still couldn't do it though. I need the light one. But that bugs him out, and he gets stuck in air. Because a good one is doing this, and then you can do this after it. You could either do this, or I think you can get this as well. Well, I can't follow it up right now because it's broken. But the good thing about this is that his heavy kick is a cross-up. And then if you're holding down, you can just do that. And it'll hit no matter what side it's on. Like you just do that. Okay, yeah, right. Power Geyser's a little broken too. Alright, look, Terry's really broken right now, alright? You have to bear with me. I've been calling them chombos ever since someone accidentally made that typo. That's a funny one, chombos. I didn't notice that you spelled it that way the first time. You could just code it to set the Y value to 0 manually and that'll fix it. Wait, set what manually? Are you talking about like when he bugs out like this? I got a more systematic approach in mind. It's broken right now only because the math is not perfect. When the deterministic math gets in, it's going to solve most of these problems. I had built additional pieces of code to help mitigate that problem, and that's why the current version that you can download worked fine. But when I add rollback, I don't need to do that anymore because I'm going to have the deterministic calculations. Oh, and also for the for moves that like move you on the up off the ground and stuff, I'm changing the way that the gravity pulls you back down too. So this bugs out because it doesn't pull him all the way back to the ground. But when I do add that, like Ryu and Ken's Shoryukens have the new gravity code, but this one doesn't yet. So when I add that, it'll be fine. Yeah, I mean, like, I can manually adjust it, sure, but there's no need to really do that if you can make a systematic fix for it. Nope. There we go. Ooh, there we are. Yeah, if you just do this... I don't know, that one might... No, that one doesn't work. Or if you just do this... you can get it there. You can get it there. But the best way is get the uppercut in the middle there. So going here to here, and then into power wave. Come on. There. That gives you the most stun. And then you can, if you run in and then after that you run in and do it, you can get both hits. Here's a little trick secret for Pocket Fighter EX. If you hit a projectile close up, you get a lot more stun off of it as opposed to farther away. You could probably literally just see how much quicker that was. But I can show the numbers here. Oh, sorry, show. 22 stun versus 15 stun. So that means if you use a projectile in a combo really close, you get additional ability to follow up with something. Like if you max cancel it. Because I was running into a problem where like ending a combo and going into a max cancel with Ryu with the Hadouken like really didn't give me anything to work with. There was nothing interesting about using that over any other special. So I thought, hey, if I increase the hit stun when the projectile is close, it can open up new combo routes and actually have uses for using them close up. Thought that was cool. That's in the current public demo too. How similar are Ryu and Ken's Hadoukens? I mean, they're generally the same thing. I think Ryu's has more stun, some more hit stun, so you can get more off of it during combos. And I think, yeah, the Ryu's slow and fast Hadoukens are greater degrees of speed than Ken. So Ken's are both kind of relatively fast, but Ryu's got a slow Hadouken, so he can kind of trip people up a little better. And Ken has less variance in the speed to work with. And that's for the most part the difference. I don't think there's a damage difference. And of course, Ryu can use the Denjins and stuff, and that's all on top of the normal stuff. And of course, Ken doesn't have that. So see, his slow one's slower than Ken's one. He's got the fire one for EX. And then his Denjins will knock down on hit. And he can charge them. They do a lot of stun. They also guard break. Oh, if I can get him here, let me just make him guard the whole time. Oh, I messed that up. So you can do something like try to see if they want to play a game of chicken, would you? The other thing with Ryu is the charge can be backdash canceled, so you can fake people out. Am I gonna throw it or am I not gonna throw it? Only one way to find out. Can't really put people in a guessing situation. Yeah, the max cancel. I took out the floating point assistance code. Sometimes it doesn't calculate right. And there's the thing, you know, when you think of like, oh, what's a real game example of it not of determinism causing the game to fail? Well, right there, right now, the math is not lining up correctly to give me a max cancel. And it'll just kind of randomly do that, and then it'll be back after a while. Oh well. Alright, I'm pretty drained now, so do we have any last minute questions? If not, I think we're gonna shut her down and I need to get some rest. Oh, there we go. There's the max cancel. The math worked out that time. But yeah, I had to take out all those extra floating point safeguards. Number one, they're redundant once the fixed point math gets in there. And number two, I have to take them out at some point, and that point just happens to be now. Oh, I missed the cancel. Oh, I didn't have enough meter. What did I miss? Alright, I'm not seeing any questions, so I guess we'll close her on out. It was a good day today. We had a lot of fun. Well, I hope it was fun. I thought it was fun. When's Marvel? I don't know, man. Right now, Disney and Marvel are looking at everybody except Capcom for games. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like Marvel's coming back for a while. Yeah, it was a fun stream and we saw a lot of new and kind faces. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did have a lot of new people pop in. So it was a good Q&A. A lot of people are curious about the rollback. You know, from all levels, from developers or just people curious about it. I think the biggest question a lot of people had was like, wait, so how come some games have it and some games don't? And why can't, like, KOF 13 have it? That's a big one. A lot of people want KOF 13 to have it. And unfortunately, it's just the cards are not lined up for that one. Not right now. You have to wait a couple console generations. Alright, so we'll be back, or I guess I'll be back. Hopefully you'll all be with me. On Thursday. So I'm doing Ecto Rush this month. That's the project we're working on. That's one of the what's one of the projects I can sell, because it's an original one. That was a game that we made back in 2014. And I want to spruce it back up and re-release it because right now it's unavailable. Excuse me. That's what we'll be working on Thursday. And then Sunday we'll be playing something. Hey, maybe my controller converter will finally come in this week. And then I'll be able to play some GameCube and Game Boy Advance games through the GameCube without, you know, using the crappy GameCube controller. It'd be great. Yeah, well, thanks you guys for showing up. I had a lot of fun, and we'll be back Monday again with more Pocket Fighter EX stuff. I mean, we did a special rollback thing today, but I mean, like, if you have a question, come on back any Monday. I mean, that's the stuff we're working on anyway on Mondays. Pocket Fighter EX stuff, rollback stuff. That's the day for that. So that's pretty much it. And then I've got my wonderful patrons that help keep everything going and gives me more resources to continue doing this stuff. I mean, I'll be doing it anyway, but I can dedicate more time to it the more resources I have to throw at it. So, okay, here, I'm pulling it up. There's the link. I'm chilling out. Check that out if you want. You can get advanced builds of the stuff that I'm working on, including this game. So if you want to check out Broken Terry for yourself, hit it up, take a look. And I've got a list of the patrons to read out. I got Alex Smith, Mugen, David Leonard, Garen Johnson, Cameron Lyle, Varian X, Wakened Emperor, Angel, Roy Luis, Mike Cruz, Taryn Williams, Bryce Noglingam, AJ, Alex D, and Grave Spirit, Omega Keo, Miles Griffin, Ben K, D-Money107, and LD Walker. Thank you guys extra super special much. Helps keep my Photoshop from getting canceled. Damn Adobe wants $10-15 a month for it. But I can't not have it. I mean, I do most of my work in Photoshop. Not the Spriteworks. Spritework I use Sprite, and that's a one-time thing, but everything else goes through Photoshop, so it's a nightmare. Oh well. Anyway, I'm getting out of here. I'm tired. I gotta go. Gotta go eat something and go lay down. So thanks again, everybody, for hanging out. I'll see you guys next time, and scrub out.